Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lucas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And happy Thanksgiving from us up here in Canada. It's been a nice, relaxing weekend, I'm sure, for both of us here. Nice way to kind of get back into the swing of things, having a reading week here for our school. So nice to just take a relaxing week here and talk a little bit about this weekend's racing in NASCAR and in Formula One. But first off, how you doing today, Kyle, after a chaotic race at the Roval in both series, and then we had some records broken this weekend on the Formula One side of things?
Yeah, fantastic weekend of racing. I will just add quickly, it's the correct date for Thanksgiving as well. We do it correctly here in Canada. You do it wrong in America. That's all I'll say on that. But no, a fantastic weekend of racing, not raking, believe me. There's no raking doing here in a condo building in Toronto, I can tell you that. But no, it was a fantastic weekend. Anytime that NASCAR goes to a road course, I'm always super excited. The Roval is no different. It's always super exciting. And we got wet weather racing as well, and we don't get enough of that on the NASCAR side of things. Obviously, was a little disappointed not to get any weather necessarily at the Nürburgring, but still a very interesting race nonetheless.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like what we saw this past weekend,
No.
namely in the Xfinity Series. But we've got lots to talk about, and of course, we've got some breaking news to kind of kick off today's show. After you recorded last Thursday, of course, Clint Bowyer wanted to throw the news right out
Right
after we finished
after I
recording.
was done editing the show and putting it up. As
Yeah,
soon, like, oh
perfect
man.
timing.
What's up
Thanks,
with these
Clint.
weird timing announcements? Like,
I know we got
Hamlin
to
did
record
that
at 10 at
announcement at
night.
like 8:30, like,
Yeah.
and then obviously this one happened at like 7 or 7:30. Like, I don't know.
They
They
like
need
to
to
leave
work
it
on their
late.
announcement times, but
Yeah, I wish there was
regardless.
a set time for announcements and everybody could just release them all at once. It would be great. But the news is Clint Bowyer is retiring, something that I didn't actually see was coming. It seemed like it was getting later into the season here, and it seemed like he would be back in that 14 car for Stewart-Haas Racing in 2021, but that is not the case, as he will retire at the end of the season and move to the Fox broadcast booth to join Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon for the to finish out the trio over there. Something that's been kind of lacking since Darrell Waltrip has left the broadcast booth there for the past couple of seasons. So this is a huge opportunity for Bowyer. Obviously, he's done the iRacing earlier this season when they had the Pro Invitational, and fans loved him. I loved him there. It seemed like a great fit there with Clint Bowyer and Jeff Gordon and Mike Joy. They had great chemistry. I wish, I love Bowyer so much on and off the track. I think he's a great person for the sport. So it's going to be sad to see him not in the 14 car next season, leaving a spot open, though, for someone like Chase Briscoe, which is widely rumored to be the guy that's going to replace him there at Stewart-Haas Racing to take that spot. But what are your thoughts here, Kyle? Someone I'm sure we both love here with Clint Bowyer is not leaving the sport, going to the broadcast booth, but leaving the racetrack and the race car.
Yeah, it's a little bit sad because Clint Bowyer is a fan favorite. He's always exciting to watch, whether that's on Radioactive or hearing the radio on the broadcast, or just in general his racing style as well. He's one of those veteran members, obviously, of the grid, and it's always unfortunate when you start to lose a few of those, and obviously losing two big ones this year now in Jimmy Johnson and Clint Bowyer. But the fact that he's sticking around and we'll still see him every single week, and honestly in a role that is probably even better for him on TV and in the booth there, everything that we've seen from him, whether, as you mentioned there, with the iRacing stuff, or what he's done with the Xfinity Series and Select Duty with the Truck Series as well on the actual race broadcasts, has been fantastic. And he's been a breath of fresh air. He's been super entertaining. And so it kind of seemed like this was inevitable. We just didn't necessarily think it would be this upcoming season. Everything kind of was going towards Bowyer potentially staying in that car, whether that was sponsors dictating things, or whether it was Stewart-Haas wanting to keep a veteran driver for another year and then make the switch when it's the new car. All these different things kind of seemed like we were heading down that route. And so I, like you, was a little bit surprised when the announcement did come from Clint Bowyer that he would be stepping away from the car and into the booth for next season. Now, when we originally made our silly season predictions, we both believed that Clint Bowyer would be retiring at the end of the year. I feel like in the past 9 or 10 weeks, it's kind of shifted towards him staying in the car. But from here now, it seems like the writing is on the wall, essentially, as to who's going to replace him. And it seems like it will be Chase Briscoe. All of the rumors suggesting Kyle Larson to Stewart-Haas have basically dried up in the same span as well. Everything is switched over to Hendrick if he does get reinstated. And really, when you look at the free agent market, when you look at the pipeline and everything involved, it really does seem like it's Chase Briscoe's ride going into the future here. So it's definitely been interesting to see how everything's played out over this season. How at the beginning of the year, it kind of felt like it was inevitable Bowyer would be leaving. Mid-season, things started to shift. And honestly, up until last week, even before the announcement, it kind of felt like it was almost a done deal that he would be returning. So obviously unfortunate, but I'm very, very excited to see what Bowyer will do in a full season in the booth.
Yeah, I might actually get one silly season prediction right here. That would be
you did
absolutely
have Briscoe
fantastic.
Originally, yep.
I did have Briscoe, so I will take that if that comes to fruition. But for myself, I love Bowyer. I think, my first race I ever watched was 2007, the Daytona 500, and that he's infamous for sliding across the finish line upside down and on fire. It kind of got me hooked in a sense, seeing that. I mean, how could you not? I mean, it's a pretty damn cool thing to see, and it doesn't happen very often. And the fact that was my first ever race that I watched was pretty special. So I've got a little soft spot for Bowyer, definitely. He's a great personality. He's going to add a lot of enthusiasm to that booth, and something that is probably a little bit in a desperate need of for Fox. I think they've kind of driven a lot of the changes here for the next season, obviously with the dirt race at Bristol, and I think Fox had a large part in this as well, in talking to Bowyer and really wanting him to be in the booth after seeing how well fans perceived him on the screen this past year for the Pro Invitational Series. So I think there was a little bit of pressure there probably from above with the Fox executives on Bowyer, and it was a contract season. You got an up and coming in Briscoe. It just kind of all made sense for Bowyer to retire, but I don't know if he necessarily feels like he's done racing. I think you will see him in part-time things. Maybe he'll run a couple of Xfinity Series races here and there. I'm sure he'll provide maybe a Dale Jr. kind of aspect to it, where he races in maybe one or two races a season if they need someone to fill something out. I think Clint Bowyer, you could see him in that role. I don't think he's done racing for sure. Just going to take a little bit of time in the slow lane instead of the fast lane here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him in the broadcast booth, though, and it's going to be quite the needed change for Fox. So any thoughts there, final thoughts there, Kyle, on Clint Bowyer before we move on?
Yeah, just the final thing is that he's still a good race car driver. He still made the playoffs with relative ease this year, when it kind of seemed like, at least at that midseason point, that we both kind of thought that he would maybe tail off as the season goes along. And that wasn't the case. He still he held steady for all of this season. He made it through to that second round as well. And he even had a shot to make it through to the round of 8 for a little bit there before, obviously, some issues, which we'll talk plenty about coming up here when we review this race. But still a very good race car driver, and it's nice to see somebody go out not necessarily by their own choice by the sounds of things, but when they still have talent remaining. And so it's not a case where Clint Bowyer's completely done and dusted and it's just kind of been like, okay, it's time to move on, which kind of opens the door for what you mentioned there and maybe some select races into the future. So it's nice to see that we didn't get this dramatic fall off from Bowyer, that he's going out while still being a competitive driver.
Yeah, after this past weekend, you have nothing but respect for the guy.
Absolutely.
It was an incredible show to watch on Sunday, racing in the lead, having issues, which we'll talk about, and then coming back to get a top 10 nonetheless was really, really impressive for Bowyer. And then the photo showed it all after the race that captured. He was exhausted. He was, I'm sure that the amount of emotions that have happened over the past week was a culmination of all that, just trying out there to prove that he's not done yet. But unfortunately for him, he will not win the championship this season. But we'll move on here, Kyle, as news broke this afternoon of something that we didn't really see coming here either. Oliver Askew will not return to Aaron McLaren in IndyCar for 2021. And it's still undecided. Obviously, he's been experiencing concussion-like symptoms, and he's been unable to race the past couple of races with Helio Castroneves coming in there and replacing him for the Harvest GPs this past or 2 weekends ago. And this opens up a spot at a very competitive Aaron McLaren, and it leaves Oliver Askew looking for a ride for next season. He's had a really good rookie campaign, been really solid. Obviously, McLaren has been solid across the board with Pato O'Ward and himself. So there's a lot of potential here in Oliver Askew, a rookie. He's got the future right ahead of him here. It's just who wants to take that big step of taking him on for next season when it's kind of getting later into the driver market for next season as well. Obviously, there's a couple of question marks remaining for next season with Zach Veach vacating that seat over there at Andretti Autosport. But what are your thoughts here, Kyle? There's obviously speculation on there's a big name coming in, maybe from Formula One in Sergio Perez, there's some links there with him being out of a ride for next season. But Oliver Askew's the big news story here with him not being able to return to McLaren in 2021.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking move for me because obviously he didn't have the competitive season that he was maybe expecting or hoping for in his first full-time season in IndyCar there. But the performance was definitely lacking in comparison to his teammate Pato O'Ward. And then the injury as well is kind of something that is unfortunate, but and you can't really determine at this point whether that factored in here, but it's not a great look to drop somebody that is going to miss at least 2 races, maybe even a third because of a concussion there, and then dropping him before the season's even over. So hopefully there's not any like long-term maybe mental aspects of that in relation to athletes and drivers in this case disclosing injuries like concussions. But what I will say here is that it's definitely Askew getting the short end of the stick. He didn't even get a full season in a regular year with the chaos that was this 2020 season. So it's unfortunate from that regard. But when we get into the more of the silly season aspect of this, I really don't feel like Aero McLaren would be making a move like this unless they felt like they either needed a veteran driver to step in and maybe help that team progress to a point where they're even further along, and maybe that's pairing a veteran driver alongside Pato O'Ward, or maybe it's because there's a big ticket free agent available and they have a seat to potentially fill. Now, we heard Zach Brown in the previous when talking about the potential of Sergio Perez coming over and obviously being the marquee North American in IndyCar right now, obviously as the Mexican on the grid without a drive right now. And they kind of talked about it as if they wouldn't drop one of O'Ward or Askew for him, but if it was an option, they would gladly bring him in. So now that Askew's out, it creates this interesting dynamic of one, who's replacing him, and if it is Perez, what about those comments? But for me, there's probably 3 names that I'm looking at as potential fillers here for that seat, and obviously it's the aforementioned Perez just because of the just marquee signing that it would be, and if he is coming over to IndyCar, it would probably have the Formula One tie there of McLaren bringing him over, kind of being the bridge there. So maybe that's an option. Obviously, Elio Castroneves would be a veteran driver that has filled in for Askew these last couple races, but hasn't looked all that great. Now, that could just be rust from not being in the full season, or maybe it's his age and maybe he isn't the competitive driver anymore. I feel like it's a lot more the former than the latter there. And then obviously the third big name free agent right now is James Hinchcliffe, and he was dropped by Aero McLaren for Pato O'Ward and Askew last year. So maybe there's a reunion there. But right now there's 2 big seats to fill now, and that's the McLaren seat and obviously that final Andretti seat. So there's a lot of moving parts there, but what are your thoughts on this situation here?
Well, I think it's unfortunate, obviously, with Askew. I think it's, like you said, the short end of the stick. I didn't think he deserved it. Obviously,
No,
he's
not
just
at
been
all.
kind of in second to a Pato O'Ward this season. Some of it's from his own doing, and some of it's just because Pato O'Ward has just been absolutely lights out in the majority of the races this season. So it's very hard to compete with that. And anything's going to kind of look second to what he's performed in a fairly new team here with McLaren in the IndyCar side. So I don't know. I think it's, if it is, I mean, obviously there's been a little bit of rumblings about it was because of this concussion that he suffered, and they just kind of dropped him because it's kind of the easiest choice to make here if they're bringing in someone. And I don't think they would have done this if they don't have something lined up kind of thing. It seems like they probably have something that they have a hunch that they could get someone, who that is, we don't know, but it definitely leaves Askew looking for a ride for next season and in a very limited market right now with not a lot of movement. Just kind of the 2 top rides. Obviously, there's could be more in the off season, but usually IndyCar doesn't wait till January to do their movement. It's kind of early on, and I hope that he gets back in the car for the season finale at St. Petersburg in a couple weeks' time. It'll be kind of like one last audition kind of thing for himself. But if he's not fit to race, he shouldn't do it. He's proven himself throughout the season that he has talent. Obviously, it hasn't been as great of a season as he would have liked, but he's a really good young talent, and I think it's going to be unfortunate to see if he loses out on a ride entirely for next season just because of something out of his control. I mean, he took the proper precautions here with sitting out. He didn't force it. Obviously, he did race maybe a couple of races too many there after the incident at the Indy 500, but he still took the time to really realized what was important, and that was his health. And I don't think that he should be scrutinized and be at the short end of the stick once again to this decision. But unfortunate there, but we'll see what happens with Aaron McLaren. It's obviously an up-and-coming team, very competitive, could be contending for maybe a top 3 in the championship next season, maybe even a championship spot, depending on how much Penske does improve with the entire organization as a whole. Obviously, Newgarden has been really good this season, but Pagenaud and Will Power have had some iffy spots throughout the season there. So, and Scott Dixon, who knows how long he can keep this up for. I mean, he's been incredible.
At this rate forever.
He's getting up there a little bit in age, but I don't see any signs of him slowing down really. So lots of different options here for McLaren to kind of choose from. They've got quite the talent available to them, and Askew's left on the outside looking in. So any final thoughts here, Kyle, on Oliver Askew and something that we didn't really see coming at all?
Yeah, the final thing here is we've kind of focused more on the McLaren side of things, but let's not forget that Oliver Askew is still considered a top prospect here. And let's not forget it, back in 2019, which feels like ages ago, he won the Indy Lights Championship racing for Andretti Autosport, and they have a seat available now in obviously what was formerly Zach Veach's seat. So if they decide to go the veteran route and go with James Hinchcliffe, it seems like that is the likely scenario right now. But if they want to maybe keep that seat in younger hands and maybe somebody to go forward with in the future, maybe there's the potential for a reunion there with Askew and Andretti, and that would be an awesome landing spot for him after what's been an unfortunate season mixed with disappointing results, flashes of talent, and then obviously the injury at the Indy 500 in a race that he was looking really strong at as well. So maybe we could see a reunion there. Obviously, it seems more likely that Hinchcliffe gets that seat, but IndyCar silly season has some catching up to do with the rest of silly season on obviously the NASCAR and Formula One sides of things. But given what we've seen now from Jimmy Johnson, the Andretti move and who fills that seat, and now McLaren, it is kind of catching up now on the equal level of crazy silly season all across the board.
Yeah, it's been a wild year across all motorsports.
Feels like every week at this point we have another big bombshell.
I know. I feel like it's been happening since we started doing the show back up against, like, I feel like there hasn't really been a week where we've where someone's leaving and then someone taking its spot or whatever, vice versa. But there's been a lot of movement this season. Obviously, some teams are really wanting some change and some others are standing put. But definitely the most movement I've ever seen across the board really in any year that I've been watching motorsports for sure. So we'll definitely keep an eye on Oliver Askew as we move forward here. As Kyle said, Andretti Autosport seems like a good option if they don't go with Hinchcliffe, if they want to stay younger. I just hope Hinchcliffe gets a ride out of all this situation. I hope he's not on the outside looking in. I think he's both drivers are deserving of a full-time ride, so maybe they can figure something out there. So we'll move on here to we'll stay in the IndyCar side of things to some respects here with Scott McLaughlin, someone we've talked about here on the show in the past couple of weeks. He's expected to go full-time in IndyCar next season for Roger Penske, and as a result, Roger Penske is expected to pull out of his majority stake ownership for the supercar team down there in Australia, as per Adam Stern. So not really too big of a deal here, obviously, on the supercar side of things, we haven't really discussed it, obviously, too much because it is on a different time zone. It's really crazy to try and keep track of it all. but it's Roger Penske, someone that we're very familiar with in both forms of motorsports, in NASCAR and IndyCar. So with Scott McLaughlin, the infamous supercar driver, has done incredible things down there in Australia, expected to come over to IndyCar, obviously making his debut at the season finale in St. Petersburg in a couple weeks' time. This is very encouraging signs that Penske is bringing some new talent, some new blood into IndyCar, which there's some big names expected to be here next season with Jimmy Johnson, Scott McLaughlin, all around the kind of the world here. If Sergio Perez comes in, this series is going to go from almost like a B to an A+ kind of standard here with some of the talent that's coming in here. So in terms of the ownership stake, it makes sense because Penske, if he's bringing him over to his side of the planet here in North America, it makes sense to kind of drop the Australia side of things with the supercar team. But what are your thoughts here, Kyle, on Penske's decisions here on both the majority stake ownership side of things and bringing McLaughlin in most likely full-time?
Yeah, anytime that somebody's stepping away from an ownership role in any motorsports, it's unfortunate news, but it does kind of seem like something that we were maybe trending towards with Penske, obviously acquiring IndyCar, major investment there, and maybe the money had to work somewhere else, and it's unfortunate that the casualty seems to be his supercars team, but the nice thing is that at the very least, that team will still be in operation just with the other half of ownership taking over in full. So it's not all dire there, but as greedy North Americans here, I want Scott McLaughlin for ourselves, and he is extremely fun to watch. So the fact that it seems like all signs are pointing towards McLaughlin coming over to North America and running a full season, whether that be in a full schedule of IndyCar, road course schedule in IndyCar, or maybe even mixing in some NASCAR there as well. Exciting things to come there. Obviously, interesting timing with the rumor there from Adam Stern, given that this week is the Bathurst 1000, which is a crazy race down in Australia, one of my personal favorite tracks in the world. The elevation changes, the crazy speeds, everything about it is so much fun to watch. So definitely keep an eye out for some of the highlights there, or if you're able to watch some of it live, because it's an awesome event. But interesting timing in that regard, given it's the marquee event of the supercar season. But we are coming down to the end of things here. Given the test, given the fact that McLaughlin was supposed to race a couple road courses this year already in IndyCar, seems like he'll go the IndyCar route. And just imagine seeing Scott McLaughlin and Jimmy Johnson on the same track in IndyCar next season. Just crazy stuff that we could see. But I'm super pumped about this, and I cannot wait for the North American audience to be introduced to Scott McLaughlin coming up, what seems like very soon.
Yeah, they'll love him. That's for sure.
He's so much fun, man.
It's not going to take long for people to really love this guy, and someone that's, for myself, I've kind of been introduced to him over the past year, I'd say, for sure. He's really caught my eye, and it's been really fun to watch. Obviously, his highlights are just spectacular to watch. And he's a true talent behind the wheel, and it's going to be very fun to see him come to North America here in just a couple weeks' time and see what he can do. Obviously, I'm not expecting too much in the inaugural race, but if he comes out there and gets a top 10 or something, you better watch out for Scott McLaughlin next season in a full-time ride for Penske, a very competitive Penske team, I might add. So we'll move on here, Kyle, to just the final couple of notes here. Just one is a rumor. One is set in stone kind of thing. With Colleague Racing on the Xfinity side of things, obviously they've got two full-time cars there with Ross Chastain and Justin Haley, and also a third car that they run on part-time with AJ Allmendinger, who had a pretty successful weekend at the Roval, I'm not going to lie. But Colleague Racing seems to be on the path, is what's being reported, for a full-time Cup Series entry in 2022. Obviously, that's the debut of the next gen car for the Cup Series, and it provides teams that may be on a smaller budget to get equal playing field with the money that's having to be invested into the car. So this makes a lot of sense for Colleague. Obviously, they've come from a very much middle pack team in the Xfinity Series to a very legit contender, with Ross Chastain and Justin Haley really bringing up the performance in that team. Haley, obviously a perennial, a super speedway racer now, and Chastain going to the Cup Series next season for Chip Ganassi Racing as well. So they've got really two talented drivers there in their Xfinity Series program right now. And I cannot imagine what they're going to do in the Cup Series. It kind of feels a little bit similar to, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say Spire, because I think that's just like a step lower, but I'd say they're going to be in that mid-pack range initially there. But another new team potentially in the Cup Series in 2022 adds to that mid-pack battle. And hopefully we're trying to get rid of some of the back marker teams more and more as we get more competitive rides. And that just adds to the competitive nature of NASCAR. But what are your thoughts here, Kyle? If Kaulig does go this route with a Cup Series team, what are your expectations in 2022? That's obviously a long ways down the road, but from what we've seen in the Xfinity Series so far, this is only great things to come from Kaulig Racing.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting proposition, because obviously we've heard rumors and whatnot that maybe sometime down the road that Matt Kaulig would look to form that Cup Series team and kind of build what they've done in the Xfinity Series and do it at the top level of stock car racing. And it's been awesome to watch them kind of do it how like you're supposed to do it. And that's kind of start in like the mid pack there for a handful of years with who did they have in the car at some points, like Blake Cook and Ryan Truex at times, then slowly progress up the field, whether that be in driver and equipment, and slowly make their way up until what we've seen this season, and by far their best season, where they're legitimate contenders on all tracks with the Stuart Haas, your Penske's, and Joe Gibbs, which is not something that we've been able to say for their entire history until maybe like the second half of last year, but probably more just this season as a whole. Obviously, you look at Ross Chastain and in the championship race, and how he's been able to stick like third in points all season, how Justin Haley's been able to maybe get some of the points that actually matter, and obviously the wins and the playoff points for the actual championship race, not just kind of the season-long points race, obviously, anymore. But it's an exciting thought, because NASCAR needs younger owners, and Matt Kaulig kind of fits the bill there. So if/when they do step up in 2022, I would expect them to kind of start out similar to how it did at Xfinity level, and that's probably start out in kind of that bottom tier of the mid tier, kind of compare them to probably your front row motorsports from last season, where you're probably looking at like 28th to 30th in points, a step above the backmarker teams for certain, but not quite at that mid-tier level yet, and then slowly build from there. We saw them do it at the Xfinity level. I have no doubt that they'll be able to do it at the Cup Series level as well. It's just about kind of the funds, having the people there, and then the driver. They've got two of those boxes checked off at the very least, in the funds to do so and the team to do so. Just bring everybody up and toss them in the Cup Series one. From here on out, it'll just kind of be finding drivers and whatnot. So it's exciting to see. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see whether they keep that Xfinity program, or whether they can that and just go Cup Series racing. That could potentially be a big blow to the Xfinity Series looking here in a couple of years. But anytime that you can get new owners in the Cup Series level, that's huge. We've seen it this year with Justin Marks starting a team, Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan, obviously the big ones, starting a team. And we could potentially see it in a couple more years here in 2022 with that next-gen car with not just Matt Kaulig, but plenty of other people. So it's a very, very exciting time for NASCAR Cup Series ownership. And yeah, anytime you can get a more competitive midfield and look at maybe even getting more competitive top-end cars, that's awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to think, what if Roush still had that 4-car stable kind of thing, and if Penske were to add another one, like what the sport could really be? I mean, it would be quite the change. I mean, obviously, if you think back to Roush when they were very good, I know Roush is kind of off topic here for sure, but it just in terms of like adding a whole bunch more competitive cars into their glory day kind of things, combining that with the midfield battle that we're going to have here in a couple years' time with the new teams coming in, this sport could be absolutely sensational across the board, and he could have some big names
for sure.
who really missed the playoffs here, not maybe based off of their own performance or speed, just because the competition level is so high and across the board it's so consistent. But there's definitely some opportunity here for Kaulig to be a very good mid-pack team and move their way up through the field in the Cup Series with proper funding and the amount of time and energy put into the team. Like Kyle said, it will be interesting to see the Xfinity Series program if they just abandon that entirely and focus on the Cup Series side of things, which would be a big blow, like Kyle said as well, because we're kind of getting slimmer in the Xfinity Series in terms of competition level. Maybe that's part of the driver prospects that are down there right now, and also with the performance as well. There's not as many top teams down there as there was over the past decade or so. So it'll be very, very interesting to watch that storyline evolve. Obviously, we'll find that out in 2021, what their plans are for the next-gen car and if they will come Cup Series racing in 2022. But with the fact that they're announcing it now in the middle of a pandemic kind of thing in terms of we're looking towards that, I imagine that they will be in the Cup Series in 2022 in some capacity, whether that's maybe on a full-time basis or either they go part-time. Either way, I think we'll see colleague racing in the Cup Series very, very soon. So we'll move on here, Kyle, to the final bit of note before we get into the long-ass race recaps that we've got. I'm not going to really spend too much time on this one. It's just the NBC broadcast team of Rick Allen, Steve Letarte, Jeff Burton, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. will all be going out to the track live for the championship weekend in Phoenix in 4 weeks' time. Obviously, they were at the track this weekend. They've been covering the races since their schedule started at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. They've obviously lucked out this past weekend with Charlotte hosting a race with the Roval, so they were actually able to be at the track. I'm sure that was probably a welcome sight for them instead of having to look at a monitor. They could actually see the track and what was going on. You could definitely tell the difference in the broadcast for sure, with Junior probably looking at the track the whole time, and he got to see stuff that was happening off screen that we didn't. But yeah, you always have to judge what was on the monitor from the track itself. So that kind of made the broadcast a little stale in some respects. I'm sure it was a welcome shift in their mindset this past weekend at the Roval. So just a quick note on that there as well. Obviously great to have them at the track at Phoenix covering the championship race and give the proper respect to the championship for whichever drivers make it there at that point in time, which we'll talk about later this week on who we think is going to happen, who's going to make it to the championship for at Phoenix. So without further ado, Kyle, I think we get into the Charlotte Roval race recap.
Here we go.
Oh boy, this is going to be a tough one for myself. I'm not going to lie. Since yesterday, it's been a rough 24 hours in terms of everything that occurred for myself with my driver specifically, but we'll talk about that as the race goes on here. But obviously, the Xfinity Series race was in a torrential downpour for the most part, Kyle, which we'll talk about after the Cup Series race. It was quite the entertaining race, that one, and it seemed like we were going to shape up for something similar on the Sunday with rain, but unfortunately, it wasn't as chaotic or as torrential of a downpour on the Sunday. It kind of passed through the racetrack before the race even started, but the track was still damp enough where they had to start on the wet weather tires. But after watching the Xfinity Series race, what were your initial thoughts going into the Sunday with them starting on the wet weather tires, the first time since the 50s that this happened, that they were going to be starting on the rain tires? So what were your thoughts here going into the race on Sunday for the playoff cutoff?
Oh, I was just hoping that we would get another torrential downpour and we get to see like the same thing. It was awesome on the Saturday. Obviously, it got a little bit sloppy there when they were kind of first exposed to that real torrential downpour, when we saw like 7 or 8 people go off the track at virtually the same time. But after that, obviously there was the red flag. And then when they got back into things, it was really, really fun racing. And I was kind of hoping that we get to see the same thing. Obviously didn't end up panning out that way. We didn't get the same level of rain really at all throughout the day, which was a little bit disappointing, but it was still very cool to see them start out on a damp racetrack. It's something that obviously, as you mentioned there, we haven't seen in the Cup Series basically ever. I'm not counting the 50 stuff. It's basically ever.
Never. It's basically never happened. Yeah.
And it's an element of racing that isn't really exposed to us in the NASCAR series. It's something that we love to see in Formula One and open wheel, and we just don't get it enough in the stock cars. And they're hard enough to control on the road courses. Add in rain, and it's just a special thing. I was really hoping we'd get to see more rain at the beginning of the day, just to kind of even more equal out all the equipment, see really who would be the ones to step up through the field, obviously. And this is kind of comparing to the Saturday a lot. But at the beginning of the race, this is what we were pulling from. We saw plenty of different mid to low quality cars up in the top 5, top 10 for much of the day. because the horsepower and downforce didn't matter, because you were so light on the throttle throughout the entire run. It didn't matter whether you were in a Stewart-Haas powered car or you were in a JD Motorsports, or like we saw with Alex Labbe for much of the day, a DGM car. It didn't matter, because it was down to the driver ability through the rain, less so about your actual horsepower. So I was hoping we get to see that, maybe see some road course guys like Michael McDowell, who are in that mid-tier pack, maybe jump up and have really good days in the rain, just mix up the grid a little bit. So that was kind of my thought going into the day. I was hoping we'd get maybe that surprise shower throughout the day, but it just didn't play out that way, which was a little bit unfortunate, but we still got a great race nonetheless.
I felt like we were denied, man. Like, oh, it was so
we were definitely
frustrating.
Denied. We were definitely
like,
denied.
The fact that the rain passed through before the race
so.
started, and we didn't have any rain to even start the race. Obviously, the track was still damp, but there was no rain happening during the actual Sunday race. Was just a bit disappointing. Like, come on, why does the Xfinity Series race get the rain, and then we kind of go from a wet to dry transition, which was actually in all respects very, very interesting to watch that aspect of it go from wet to dry, and who played that strategy correctly, which we'll talk about here in a second. But we'll get underway here with a very ginger start, I'd say. Everybody taking it very cautious on the first couple of laps. Apart from Ty Dillon, probably the shock in that first stage by far, as he went from 17th to inside the top 5 in less than 5 laps. I don't know what the heck he was practicing on, where he felt so comfortable compared to everybody else in the rain. But we've seen this from Ty Dillon a couple of times, where he's really good on the initial restarts of a race, and he just kind of flies through the pack and then kind of teeters off a little bit. But they played the strategy absolutely perfectly in that first stage, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But Ty Dillon, definitely the shock early, as some guys were coming to grips with it. Keselowski took the lead from Hamlin on the first lap. I'm like, damn, I should have put Keselowski in my fantasy, but it's the first lap of the Roval. Lots of things happened throughout this race to change that from the first lap perspective. But Ty Dillon, the big shock early, going up from 17th to, I think it was 3rd even there before the competition caution. So really, really solid run from the 13 car early on. Elliott took the lead. Do you want to touch on Ty Dillon there?
Oh, no, just it was really fun to see. Obviously, following up what was a really great run, obviously the best ever for Germain Racing at Talladega there, and following it up with an awesome run to start the day as well. I don't know if I believe he had prior experience in the rain from the Xfinity Series.
I think he's done some Xfinity Series stuff.
And I don't know what else he's done other than that, but he was definitely comfortable and a lot less tentative than everybody else, because he was ready to go from the drop of the flag. So that was really fun to see. And obviously we'll talk about the rest of the first stage here, where he shows up once again.
Yeah, he was he was the storyline of the first stage, that's for sure. Elliott was up to the lead, Bowyer up to 3rd, obviously in a must-win situation coming into this weekend, and they worked their way up to 3rd. I think Ty Dillon fell back to 4th there before the competition caution there, but a really, really solid start there for Chase Elliott, someone we expected to win our winner picks, which was
basically everyone's winner pick.
Yeah, it was basically pretty easy to call this one in terms of that respect. But Clint Bowyer showing promise early on. Someone we was like kind of that 4th to 6th range. Maybe we didn't think he was going to be a top 2 contender. It seemed like he had the capability of that. Obviously, some circumstances got in the way to prevent that from happening, unfortunately, for Clint Bowyer. But we'll touch on him a little bit later. But during the competition caution, some cars came down pit road, some didn't. And some of the guys that even came down pit road just made some adjustments. And then Ty Dillon came down pit road from 4th place, along with some others, including Ryan Newman and some other back markers. And they put on the slick tires. They felt like they had hit the crossover point by then. And it seemed like they had guessed wrong early on after the restart there. It took a couple of laps for them to get going. Newman even spun on the dry tires there after the first couple of laps, because it was just a little too damp. But it definitely came into its own here as Clint Bowyer took the lead off of the restart as well. Really showing promise there. It seemed like he was in position to score that first stage win. But with around 8 laps to go in stage 1, the crossover point, hit, as many of the leaders at the mid-pack and then some of the leaders eventually came down pit road. And this was definitely in the case of the guys that had nothing to lose. They came down pit road early, and it was definitely because of the speed that Ty Dillon was showing there. As he had worked his way up to the pack, he was flying compared to everybody else, as the dry tires were definitely working a lot better than the wets, which were starting to overheat as well, as Bowyer was having to really ride the wet areas of the track where he could, and that was costing him lap time in the end as well. So Ty Dillon would take the lead as well. Once again, coming up, he went from basically kind of the 28th position there on the restart all the way up to the lead, passing guys, obviously, with some coming down pit road that lists in the blow in terms of how fast he could move up through the pack. But he passed Bowyer for the lead of the stage, and it seemed like he was cruising to a stage win before. And there's a lot of actually guys, well, not really a lot, actually, I should say. Bowyer, Truex, and the Busch brothers were basically the only guys playing on the strategy of staying out on the wets. For Bowyer to get some stage points in something that maybe something could happen for himself. And Kyle Busch obviously looking for stage points, coming in here as the closest guy to point his way in. But unfortunately for those guys, a caution would come out with John Hunter Nemechek getting stuck in the grass. It was absolutely soaked in the grass. If you got stuck in there, it was very, very difficult to get out. And that would cause a caution with 3 laps to go in stage 1. NASCAR on a lot of occasions, I feel like they would have let this go out to the caution, and then it would finish up the stage in stage 1. That was not the case on Sunday, as they had a quickie yellow, and the cars came down pit road, and they weren't even jumbled up together. They just sent them down pit road, and only 3 takers, as Bowyer, Truex, and Kyle Busch would come down pit road to get slick tires, as their strategy did not pay off for staying out there longer on the wets. And Kurt Busch would stay out trying to get some points, I guess, luck, but he did not get any stage points because he was absolutely so slow on the 1 lap shootout to end the stage, as Ty Dillon wins his 3rd career stage in stage 1, deservedly so. They played the strategy absolutely perfect there. Just fleeced the field in the first stage in terms of how they handled the cautions and the strategy with going from the wet to the dry. Christopher Bell got 2nd, Matt DiBenedetto 3rd, William Byron, and something that was not really pointed out in the broadcast, Timmy Hill got a top 5 finish in stage 1 for his strategy of coming down pit road when the competition caution hit, and they went onto the dries as well. It worked out perfectly for the 66 bunch, and they get a top 5 in the stage. Unfortunately for Timmy Hill, he would still finish last in the race, but he still gets 5th in the stage, which is, I think, a really cool accomplishment for that team. And Newman gets 6th after having that spin. He still recovered to finish 6th in stage 1. Ryan Blaney 7th. Logano was the only playoff driver to score stage point in stage 1
Wow.
in 8th place. Bubba Wallace in 9th, and Eric Jones rounds out the top 10. So obviously, that was a lot to unpack there, Kyle, in that first stage. We'll kind of get your thoughts here, as that was a very hectic first stage in some respects, with not too many incidents per se, but just the strategy was very, very fascinating to watch, as some teams handle it better than others.
Yeah, the main thing for me was the fact that we finally got to see some tire strategy in a rain race. Just kind of given the rules in the past that we've seen in the Xfinity Series level and all that kind of stuff. Whenever there's rain, there's a caution. Everybody throws on the rain tires, and then you go, and then you run the rest of the race in the rain tires, essentially. Except this was a unique situation where you start on the rain tires, but then the rain doesn't come the rest of the day, so the track eventually dries, and then you get to switch over. So it was very interesting seeing the strategy calls on that part, seeing obviously the difference in strategy between the people jumping on the dry weather tires early and others leaving the wets on longer, and seeing how that played out as the stage went on, because we saw obviously it was Newman, I believe it was, that spun on the dry tires in the wet there in that first stage. Sorry, he spun so many times I can't remember which was which. But
Twitter even lost track.
Oh man, it was
team Twitter. It was hilarious.
It was bad. But no, it was interesting seeing that, because it's not conditions that we ever get to see in the Cup Series. Again, it's the first time since the 50s they've run in the wet. So that was just so much fun to watch. And obviously Ty Dillon, who's got some road course skill to him. We saw that at the Xfinity Series level when he was in higher equipment. Hasn't necessarily had the road course success in the Cup Series level, but it was great to see him go out and do so well in that first stage, like winning the stage, being able to conserve things when the track was still a little damp with the dry tires, and then putting the pedal to the metal when the track was dry enough. That was awesome to see. And obviously off the top, which we've already talked about, when he made up that many positions and was challenging inside the top 5 after a couple of laps at the Roval in the wet. So that was really awesome to see. And I think these last couple of weeks have really shown maybe the skill that Ty Dillon has that we maybe haven't been able to see because of the Germain Racing equipment there. And maybe that's a nice little couple races to toss on the resume when you're looking out for a new ride for next year.
Yeah, I think he's got a fire underneath him right now. I think he's really trying to prove something, and whether he lands that Cup Series ride for 2021 is to be determined. But I definitely did not have Ty Dillon winning stage 1 for fantasy. I can tell you that much.
Definitely not.
If anybody predicted that, you must be a very, very diehard Ty Dillon fan, as I don't think anybody got the 10 extra bonus points for stage 1 winning there. But congrats to Ty Dillon and to Timmy Hill. I think they both deserve the props across the board there.
Absolutely.
For the strategy that they played. I wish the broadcast pointed it out more. Rick Allen, casually, as per usual, just treated Timmy Hill as a regular top-tier driver, getting a top 5 on a consistent enough basis. But as it goes, we would love to see a little bit more enthusiasm for these backmarker guys, because the fact that you get a top 5 in a stage on a road course, a track that is, the top equipment definitely does come into play, but also driver skill comes into play as well. And the fact that that's kind of the opposite in terms of the driver, not the driver, but the car equipment that he's got underneath him. And then you've got the contradictory of the skill that Timmy Hill possesses. I don't know why I'm stumbling so much over Timmy Hill's name, but Timmy Hill, it's really, really impressive to watch. He had a great iRacing career earlier this season, and I think that really came to show in the Roval race on Sunday. Unfortunately, he finished last still, but he still gets a top 5 leaving the Roval, which I'm pretty sure he will take every day of the week. So we'll move on here to stage 2 as William Byron becomes the new leader after Ty Dillon and some of the other guys that pit at that caution there at the competition. Their tires were a little bit worn, so they played it safe. They came down pit road to get some fresh ones there, and they started back at the pack. And we didn't really hear too much from Ty Dillon after that first stage. It seemed like it was definitely harder to pass, and the top guys really started to get to grips with the racetrack. So that was kind of, we saw Ty Dillon have some actual problems later on in terms of some incidents. But William Byron is the new leader at the start of stage 2, and it was, pretty cautious there after they got to the drives. I think they were still trying to get their rhythm. Obviously, no practice and everything. It was probably a little bit difficult to get everything underneath them. And then Keselowski was a very, very interesting incident here in turn 4 as Keselowski spins after getting into the seeping water that was rushing down from the tire barriers. I don't know why NASCAR never cleaned that up. It was basically moved to a dry race, but it was only 2 spots on the entire track that was wet, and they never really dried it, it seemed. But I digress. As Keselowski slipped into the wet stuff up high, spins, and then Eric Jones and Matt DiBenedetto were innocent bystanders there. They had nowhere to go, and they had to check up, and they basically had to stop there, and costing them a bunch of positions. And then the next lap after that, Christopher Bell in second place spins out of turn 4 as well, just loses on putting power down on the throttle. So an interesting couple of laps there. Some of the front guys were losing track position left, right, and center. And we'll move on here to the end, or close to the end of stage 2, as JJ Yeley gets stuck in the 77 in the same spot as John Hunter Nemechek. It was a treacherous corner, turn 5 this entire weekend. Drivers really, really struggled with the way that the banking and the slope that it has, especially with the conditions with the track being slightly damp at that point, just kind of resulted in a mess in some respects there. And JJ Yeley was an innocent bystander of the track conditions per se. So caused a caution and a restart with 2 laps to go in stage 2. And this is where some playoff implications happen, as on the restart, it was kind of a mess going into turn 3. Everybody was fighting for the bottom to try and get out of the wet stuff in turn 3 and 4 there with the seeping water. Clint Bowyer goes around the outside, and they were 3 wide. Kyle Busch stuck in the middle, gets contact there, and from the it's not the tailpipes, but the side pipes of Clint Bowyer's car, cuts down the left front tire of Kyle Busch's. And this was the first major incident to really happen for the day. Of course, it is to Kyle Busch. That's just the season that he's had, really. It has not been his luck whatsoever in 2020. You would have a flat left front tire, had to nurse the car around. He stayed on the lead lap. They made repairs to the car. He would come back strong, which we'll talk about in a minute, but did not get any stage points there, as they kind of played it safe there, set themselves up for the win. They pit under that JJ Yeley caution. try and stay out at the end of the stage to get them some valuable track position for the final stage. Obviously, this is unforeseen circumstances, and you can't predict the future in this regard with the contact there with Bowyer. And it's unfortunate for Kyle. It was definitely, I thought his race was over at that point. Still gave me hope later on, which we'll talk about, but a disappointing end to stage 2 there for the 18 team bunch. And Denny Hamlin, his teammate, would spin on the final lap with contact from Kevin Harvick. Hamlin had a rough day of things. He just seemed like he couldn't stop avoiding incidents, but with his win at Talladega, I'm sure it was just a kind of a casual Sunday drive in some respects for Denny Hamlin at the Roval. As Ryan Blaney wins stage 2, obviously the inaugural Roval winner, he wins stage 2 ahead of Chase Elliott, someone that didn't really have too many problems in terms of contact throughout the day, maybe some self-inflicted errors in terms of the team and stuff, which we'll talk about here in a sec. But Chase Elliott gets second. Christopher Bell getting another top 5 in the stages. Really, really solid run from that 95 bunch for stage points. Martin Truex Jr., someone we expect to run well at the road courses, finishing 4th in that stage. Joey Logano, Alex Bowman, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, Michael McDowell, and Brad Keselowski round out the top 10 to finish stage 2. So that's 2 stages in the books here, Kyle. One big incident there with Kyle Busch to end the stage there, but an overall, it's just some interesting aspects to the race with some guys spinning with the track conditions that the way they were. But what were your thoughts there going into the final stage after 2 stages were in the books?
Yeah, it was just kind of interesting how the race had played out. Obviously, at that point, it was looking pretty certain that it would be a green race the rest of the way. We wouldn't have any more showers, although we did maybe have some inkling that there might be one with like 10 or 15 laps to go. Obviously, that never ended up coming, but
they gave us hope.
Yeah, they gave us hope for like a half second there. But no, it was kind of looking like a normal Roval race, which is not what we expected going into the day. We expected the rain, craziness, all that kind of stuff. We still got a little bit of that in the first stage, but that second stage was much more of that normal road course race, and it's still very entertaining. Don't mind, of course. I love that racing, but it wasn't what I was necessarily expecting going today, so I was a little bit disappointed there. But we were kind of starting to see some of the regular players come throughout the field. Of course, in that first stage, it was kind of weird with the wet weather, and then the transition and the top 10 at the end of the first stage was all out of whack. Started to see that come to normal there in that second stage, obviously, with Ryan Blaney up at the front there looking really, really strong. A whole host of other characters that we expect to be in that top 10 at road courses, and was shaping up to be a very interesting final stage there with Clint Bowyer looking extremely strong for much of the day, needing a win and looking like at times over the day that maybe he'd broken through and he did have that race winning speed again at a road course, which we haven't seen in a handful of years. Obviously, he's that kind of top 5 guy, but we'd never really seen him make that breakthrough up into that first place position. We saw that throughout parts of the day. Obviously, Kyle Busch was there in a must-win situation after the stage points that he failed to garner. So you look at that, and he looked good for a bunch of this day as well. So it was kind of interesting following those. And then obviously there was a couple people above that cutoff line that were kind of fluctuating. Alex Bowman was the big one, where at points he was up high in that top 10. And then at other points he was way back in kind of the late teens, early 20s. So there was lots of fluctuation. We kind of saw the same characters. And then obviously watching that cutoff line, if anybody had an issue and if anybody in that final stage could break through and challenge for the win.
Yeah, I think at the Roval, it's unlike anything I really ever see in terms of there's so many comers and goers throughout the race. Like there's so many different strategies. And, you know, if you fall back to the 20s in the first 20 laps, it's no big deal really. Like there's so many opportunities for you to make up time, whether that's through pace itself or through other people's mistakes or strategy or whatnot. But it's still pretty crazy. You're smiling here. Have you got something with news or?
I have something with news, but it's not racing related. It's your Vancouver Canucks.
Oh,
they acquired Nate Schmidt for a 3rd-round pick. So that's an unbelievable trade for the Vancouver Canucks. So there you go. We get a little bit of hockey content in there. You're very happy about that, of course.
Jim!
when you
You're
go
getting some
from
faith back in me.
when you go from potentially getting Oliver Ekman-Larsson for a massive overpay, and instead you get Nate Schmidt for a third-round pick, bravo. But a little taste of hockey show here in the middle of the show here. But
Yeah, sorry. All right. All right. I'm enthusiastic.
there you
That's
go.
awesome. I thought it was something from Adam Stern because I've seen that look before on this show.
It's happened quite a few times, but no, this one was out of left field on the hockey side. So there you go.
Yeah.
A little bit different, but yeah, let's get back on track, or attempt to.
Yeah, let's get back on track. As a really good metaphor, or a nice segue back into it there. Good wording there, Kyle. But like I said, it seemed like it was, the Roval is just, some guys are back in the 30s, but then they can work their way up so quickly. This is a perfect example here, which we're going to talk about now. Chase Elliott coming down pit road at the start of stage 3 for a loose wheel. You saw how that played out in terms of his performance throughout the day. It was pretty easy going for making it back up to the field. Starting basically was last, a couple of seconds behind the field. We've seen that quite a bit over the season as well. Guys coming down pit road, coming to the green to start the stage. It's just very, very interesting to see the timing, and then they lose so much time. But Chase Elliott had that issue there to coming to the green at the start of stage 3. Byron is in the lead once again, and in the first lap on the restart, there's a chain reaction in turn 6 as Cole Custer gets turned around there, giving damage to multiple drivers. Hamlin goes sliding through the grass, doing a couple of donuts, thinking he's still winning Talladega. But definitely some guys got caught up in that incident there. It's a very vulnerable spot on the track, and it's a blind corner as well. So a lot of checking up was involved there, with some guys getting some damage. But we'll move on as the stage 1 winner of Ty Dillon spins in turn 6, bringing out the caution there. It was kind of an interesting caution to call, because you see sometimes some guys sliding off the track and then they let it stay green, but they called the caution on this case. And then as we move on throughout the third stage here, Kyle Busch's kind of run-ins did not end there, as he gets into Austin Dillon coming off of the Charlotte Oval turn 4, coming into the final chicane, and then Austin Dillon slides right and goes into the outside wall, collecting some nose damage there. But he still recovered to get a decent day, something that the 3 team has done quite a bit over these playoffs, recovering from some issues throughout the race. And definitely the shock of the playoffs in terms of consistency and performance for me was the 3 team, even at the Roval, after having this incident with Kyle Busch. So that brought out the caution as well. So then this brings up another restart. Some pit strategy got in play here as some guys stayed out here. This was around the lap 65 caution there. And it kind of was in jeopardy of who can make it to the end on fuel. And it brought in that sort of storyline in some respects there. As on the restart going into turn 1, we didn't see any really bad heartburn turn moments for Tom's into turn 1 this past weekend, with some guys absolutely flying into turn 1 and missing the corner completely. Bubba Wallace basically did that, but luckily for him, he had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. as kind of a buffer there, as he wipes out the 47 car going into turn 1. Unfortunate there for Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Was having a pretty solid day up to that point, and got Meyer back. I feel like that's happened a lot with the 47 team as well. Some bad luck, especially in the second half of this season, with stuff that's happened without their own doing, namely Jimmy Johnson coming to mind. There was some some contact, but nonetheless, it was disappointing there to see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. kind of taken out for no reason with Bubba Wallace. I don't know where he thought he was going, but it was definitely not trying to make turn 1 there. And as a result of that kind of stacking up and cars really slamming on the brakes and trying to check up for the spinning Stenhouse, Clint Bowyer was, after he had pitted there to try and set himself up for a good position to win the race, gets into the back of Jimmy Johnson and smashes the radiator. Well, not the radiator. He knocked the power steering line off and would be without power steering for the rest of the race. What a trooper that guy is. He ran about 40 or so laps without power steering at a road course, which is absolutely insane to watch. He went to the infield care center after the race, deservedly so, to probably get some fluids and whatnot. So what a drive. If we gave out driver of the day for Sunday, it's Clint Bowyer for myself. I mean, from the ups and downs that he had, Clint Bowyer deserves the F1's kind of side of things with their driver of the day. I'm bringing that over for Clint Bowyer, because after that, the fact that he recovered to a top 10 is beyond belief. So unfortunate there. That really took Clint Bowyer out of contention, Kyle, as we thought Clint Bowyer was in a good position here to maybe challenge someone like Chase Elliott or Ryan Blaney up there for the win, but this kind of incident really took him out of contention.
Yeah, it was unfortunate there, and you kind of look at how the rest of the race played out, and it was very interesting in that regard. For a second there, looked like maybe it would be an interesting kind of jostling for position with the playoff stuff, but the playoff as a whole kind of went how we kind of expected it on Sunday, which is a little unfortunate. But when you have such a big gap on the cutoff line going in of what was it, 21 points going in, if I remember correctly, for both Austin Dillon and Kyle Busch there. It's just too much to overcome and really create any interesting drama going into that final day. So it kind of seemed like as the day was going along, all the issues were happening to guys under the cutoff line, which just made it even worse because then all the guys above the cutoff line have fine days and everybody else below it have to try and come back from stuff. So definitely not the crazy end to the round that we've maybe seen in years past with side-by-sides of people at very different parts of the track trying to pick up positions. Kyle Larson with a screwed up race car coming through, passing one guy insane at the end to make his way to the next round. Crazy stuff like that. Obviously, we didn't get any of that this time around because there was just too many points to overcome. So it was definitely unfortunate for the playoff stuff, but the race itself in a vacuum was still very good, and we got a very interesting last bit of that race, obviously, going to the end of things.
Yeah, both weekends in a row, a lot of the guys below the cutoff line, it just campered them. Like Talladega, it seemed like they were the only guys to really get caught up in wrecks there early on where they couldn't really recover, and especially that stage one with 4 laps to go comes to mind with some of the guys there. It was just the points gap was absolutely insurmountable after stage 2. Really, you had to win. Nobody scored stage points really that needed stage points. Kyle and Bowyer and Dillon, they all didn't score stage points. So they didn't do themselves any favors after the first 2 stages. But when you look at what was happening in those 2 stages, it's hard to really put the blame on them for not getting stage points because the strategy was so up in the air. And obviously the incident there with Kyle and Bowyer didn't help themselves either. But we'll move on to Ryan Blaney spinning from the lead here. This was around 35 laps to go. The 12 car was looking really, really solid throughout the day. Was struggling in the wet, I'd say. Didn't really come up through there too quickly. But once the dry hit, Ryan Blaney's a really, really solid Roval racer there at Charlotte. And unfortunately for him, he spins from the lead and almost got doored by Matt Kenseth. It was very, very close. It was very close to a very catastrophic end to the day there for both drivers. But luckily for Blaney, he would continue on and get a really solid run out of things in the end. Ryan Preece, was in the lead there with around 30 laps to go and did a commendable job holding off some of the sports best with Joey Logano, Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Busch up there after recovering from his damage. They were all there in the top 5. So Preece was doing a very, very good job holding them off for as long as he did. And he relinquished the lead eventually to Alex Bowman. And then Chase Elliott regains the lead from his teammate there before a caution would come out for debris. And then somehow in that caution, Kenseth is head on into the barriers, which we never saw a replay of how that occurred. But Matt Kenseth's season's just been terrible since he's come back. I wonder if he regrets even coming back this season now looking back at it, because it seems like it's been a kind of a waste of time in some respects for himself. Just hasn't had the runs, and with no practice, I'm sure he didn't envision that for the entirety of the season going forward when he signed up for it. So I think once he signed on, it was hard to back out of it, but it's been a rough go of things for Matt Kenseth, and it's not the right way for him. If this is the end for Matt Kenseth in the Cup Series, which it most likely is, it's not the greatest season to kind of go out on for sure. It would have made a lot more sense for him to go out in the 6th team and going back to Roush, but this is kind of I don't know. I wouldn't say hamper his reputation at all. It's just been unfortunate circumstances for the 42 team this season and a position that he wasn't expecting to be in whatsoever. But that was unfortunate there to see the 42 car head first into the barriers for no reason from what I can tell. But it was kind of setting up here Chase Elliott's race to lose as he passed Alex Bowman there. And then this brought out a caution there, and it provided the opportunity for some guys to play with some strategy. And it definitely was on Kyle Busch, as he was the only guy really in position to get in that win and you're in mode at the end. And he stays out when basically everybody else pits. A couple of drivers, Eric Jones had pitted prior to that caution there, so it worked out for him to move up into the running order there. Denny Hamlin and Christopher Bell, his three Toyota teammates there, try to play buffer for as long as they could. And eventually on that next restart, Kyle Busch on the fresher tires would just get past, as it was going to be almost an insurmountable task for him to hold those guys off. I don't understand the strategy there from the 18 team. I know they want to get the lead, hold that track position, but getting fresh tires there and in a position where he has the oldest tires among anybody in the field and in a position where you're questionable on fuel as well, I think you just bite the bullet there. And he was in third as it was. So if he falls back to seventh there on the restart, you see how fastly those guys on the fresh tires work their way up to the pack. Maybe he could have had something a little bit more there at the end to challenge for a top two. And if there's a late race restart, he puts himself in a position maybe to get the win. But in retrospect, I think they probably regret that decision. But at the time, it's kind of a 50-50 in terms of what you're thinking there for the 18 team. So they took a risk. Unfortunately, it did not pay off for Kyle Busch and myself. It was a pretty miserable Sunday. So then Elliott gets back to the lead there, passing Eric Jones, who passed Kyle, and then passing Eric Jones was Elliott, and he goes back to the lead. And once again, that 9 car was just on rails the whole day. Nobody really had anything for him. Then the final caution of the day comes out for Brennan Poole, who stalled in turn 3 and 4 there on the oval. And this would kind of set up for 10-lap sprint to the finish. No last caution there really at the end to create mayhem. Kyle Busch, unfortunately for Kyle, who had him in his fantasy lineup, was in 7th, runs out of gas with 3 to go, forcing him to pit, and would fall back and finish in 30th. And Kyle would have had me for fantasy once again, but unfortunately for him, with the late things, it happened, and we ended up tying this week in fantasy because we had such similar lineups. But Chase Elliott drives away from the field on that final restart and wins his 4th consecutive road course race. The guy is unstoppable on the road courses across the board. His 2nd in a row at the Roval. What more can you say about the 9 team? It was very predictable coming into this race, whether it was going to be a rain race or even in the dry. It seemed like the 9 car had it covered the whole weekend. And it was very, very clear that Chase Elliott is the best road course racer in the Cup Series. And even if it comes down to setup, Alan Gustafson is the best crew chief for setting up a road course car, if you want to argue that side of things as well. But Kyle, after that long race recap there, deservedly so, nothing really changed in the end, with not really a surprise winner and nobody from below the cutoff line even coming remotely close to pointing their way in to the guys above it. So what were your thoughts there after the Roval here? We'll get final thoughts in obviously a minute, but obviously with Chase Elliott getting the win and Kyle Busch, the defending series champion, will not move on to the round of 8 and not move on to the championship 4 race for the first time since 2014.
Yeah, the big thing was just Chase Elliott doing Chase Elliott things. Obviously, I was heartbroken at the end, which is not something I thought I would say when Kyle Busch all of a sudden on the left hand of my screen drops from the top 10 with them not saying anything on the broadcast, and then all of a sudden I see somebody spin and the person passing them for like 30th place is Kyle Busch. I was not overly thrilled with that because I thought I was looking forward to another fantasy win, and nope, that one was taken away from me at the dying laps again. So tough luck for me there, but you obviously feel much worse about that. But no, the Chase Elliott is just remarkable, and I hope that maybe we can see him soon, and maybe like a Rolex 24 or something like that. Get some extra stuff in there because his talent is insane on road courses. No matter what the situation, whether he wrecks into turn 1, comes back all the way through the field, or has to pick going to a restart and fixes a loose wheel and comes back through and wins anyways. It seems like no matter what happens to this guy, unless it's terminal damage, he's going to be in contention and probably win the road course. The only thing that we haven't seen him do is win at Sonoma yet, but I feel like that's almost inevitable at this point now. It's been a dramatic turn of events here for him. As we've kind of mentioned in past episodes, it's not like Chase Elliott was this insane road course guy coming up through the series. It was far from that. Really,
I don't know where it's come from, man.
And all of a sudden, with the development model of Hendrick Motorsports and working with some of the IMSA guys, and I believe is it Jordan Taylor's the one that they work with there. So Jordan Taylor's obviously done fantastic things for them. Maybe we see him get in a road course at some point. Please, that'd be awesome
next season.
But no, at the end of the day, Chase Elliott is just a remarkable talent. He's really, really rounded out his game, obviously, to become the top threat at road courses and be good everywhere else as well, which is something that you don't really see from a lot of drivers. Maybe they become okay to good road course drivers, but we don't see this kind of development where in just a couple years' time they become the best at a certain kind of race and kind of dominate no matter what the circumstances are. So props to Chase Elliott once again, another incredible performance, and one that once again did not come easily whatsoever.
No, it was very, very it's just remarkable to watch. I mean, nothing can really keep this guy down. He wrecks last season and then he comes up through the field and still wins. Like, I don't know what you need to do to take Chase Elliott out of contention at a road course, but
you got to take him out at this point. There's nothing you can do.
For fantasy next season, I'm saving all 6 usages for the road course races because I don't know who can stop him at this point, right? Like, it seems pretty obvious that he's the favorite on these road courses by far.
He's going to win the Clash. He's going to win,
like,
if not all 5, maybe like 4.
Six. There's 6 road course races.
Sorry, I was talking regular season. That was.
I see.
And then obviously the Roval seems like a sure thing at this point. Like, this guy's insane.
Yeah, nothing can keep that 9 team down. But on the elimination side of things, Kyle Busch, Austin Dillon, Clint Bowyer, and Eric Almirola. Very quiet day from Eric Almirola. I didn't see basically anything from him
which we kind of
all
expected.
Day. Yeah, but at the end of the day, maybe you salvage something in a do or die situation, but that was not to be the case, as those 4 all eliminated in the round of 12. Disappointing for sure for myself. It's just, I haven't had to do one of these for a while in terms of not feeling this way. It's been since 2014 and a heartbreaker in that respect and how he got eliminated. But I mean, they talked about it enough on the broadcast with Kyle Busch getting eliminated. They had a graphic made that the defending champion, when they get eliminated and stuff like that, the earliest kind of thing. Screw you, NBC, for doing something like that. I've never seen you do that for any other past champion. But, of course, they do it this season. But I don't want to be a Debbie Downer or anything like that. It's just been a rough season for the 18 team. He was obviously disappointed after the race, and deservedly so in his post-race interviews and everything like that. That's obviously, I don't want to dismiss the other 3 drivers, but the defending series champion here, even if I wasn't a Kyle Busch fan, this would still be the storyline of the second round or of the year, really. The fact that he has no wins going into the final 4 races of the season, in a consecutive streak that he's trying to keep alive for 15 seasons. He's won a race. It's going to be very, very difficult for him to continue that streak with playoff drivers and not wanting to get into the way of things. But he's invested so much time and everything into this in his career. It would be a disappointment and a shame if he doesn't continue that streak. But nonetheless, it's tough to see Kyle Busch out in this round of 12. It's definitely a reset year for this 18 team. It hasn't just been 2020. 2019 was actually not that great either for the 18 team as well. Up until that championship race, it's been a pretty bad. If he didn't win that championship, I think there would be a lot more question marks around the 18 team for sure. If he doesn't win that race, we're looking at maybe an entirely different Kyle Busch right now. He probably feels he maybe got away with one in some respects last season. He got 5 wins though. It's still deserving of a championship, but just that later half of the season, it was unfortunate. Obviously, me and Kyle were together for that race last season to watch it. It feels like I can't believe that's almost been a year ago.
It's forever ago, man.
Yeah, but what are your thoughts here on, all 4 eliminations, not just Kyle Busch, but the 4 guys? We got 2 for 2, 2 out of 4 here for our predictions when we started this round here. So what were your thoughts there on the 4 guys eliminated?
Yeah, I'll start with Kyle Busch because obviously that's the big storyline here. And it's unfortunate because you want the best drivers to be in the contention for wins, playoffs, everything like that. And it's unfortunate that we don't have Kyle Busch going forwards here in the playoffs. But that being said, he hasn't been deserving of it this season. He hasn't gone out and got the stage wins that he usually does. He hasn't gone out and won the races that he usually does. And he was in a situation where he needed to show up in the second round, and it just didn't fall his way. Obviously, Talladega rebounding, looking really good, and then getting caught up in another wreck late and kind of ruining any decent points that he can have there. The Roval, bad strategy call. That's not on Kyle Busch. I really don't know what they were doing there. Maybe, but like, even if a bunch of people stay out behind you, you're still in a situation where there's enough laps left where people are going to catch up to you and pass you pretty easily. So I really don't know what the strategy call was there. So Talladega being Talladega, you can write that one off. The Roval, a bad strategy call at the end, which took you out of contention for the win, quite frankly, because after like the first 2-3 laps, Kyle Busch was fish out of water. Like, he had no chance on those old tires. And then Vegas was just kind of Vegas, and it was just kind of a weird race regardless. So when you don't have the playoff points buffers from a great regular season, the second round is always going to be crazy. And Kyle Busch just kind of got stuck in an unfortunate situation. So I can't believe I'm saying it, but I'm disappointed that he's not moving on from an entertainment perspective. But that being said, now he doesn't have to worry about any point stuff, so he can just go out and just try to win races. And that's going to be fun to see here the last little bit going into the final round, and then obviously the championship race at Phoenix. For the sake of history, I hope he gets that win and keeps that streak going. But I'm just, at this point, I don't really know if you can expect it based off of what we've seen from him this season. For the rest of the guys, they were all much more ones we kind of expected, regardless of the point situation going into this round. Obviously, I had Austin Dillon making it through based off of a big Vegas, maybe getting lucky at Talladega, but just didn't play out his way after a great first round. In that round of 12 there, obviously the heartbreaker at Vegas, where they were having such a good day once again, running top 10 all day, and then the penalty and then the engine issue really set them back the entire rest of the round, getting caught up in some issues again at Talladega, and was having a decent run at the Roval as well, until obviously the incident there with Kyle Busch. Just kind of overachieving, I would definitely say, this season, making it to the round of 12 in the first place, getting a win is awesome for them. And it's stuff to build on for next year. So you definitely can't be too heartbroken if you're Austin Dillon or that 3 RCR team. The other two, I think you can be a little bit more disappointed with, just given the fact that SHR should be having at least one more car in the round of 8, just given the performance level we see from Kevin Harvick. And we kind of never talked about Kevin Harvick this entire second round, which is kind of interesting. But
either round, it's been a very quiet Bristol
outside of Bristol, yeah. But when you look at SHR's performance here, Clint Bowyer was the only one that really had a shot. Eric Almirola, he was solid, consistent all year long, but it really does kind of feel like a lot of that was maybe backed by the qualifying format and the draw, and getting lucky quite a bit there.
Holy
and never
crap.
really having to worry about qualifying,
so
always starting in the top 12 at least. But for him, starting quite often in the top 5s, getting stage points, everything like that, kind of seemed like that carried him for a lot of the season in the point standings, staying in that top 10. And then we kind of saw it maybe exposed a little bit in specifically the round of 12 here, with a Vegas race that was largely underwhelming. And then Talladega just is Talladega. But then we know he's not a good road course racer, and we saw that when we didn't see him at all at the Roval. So when you're looking at SHR, I think you can be a little bit more disappointed on their side when you only have one guy make it through to the round of 8. And we saw in years past, back when Kurt Busch was in the 41, he was kind of that guy that would make it alongside Kevin Harvick to that round of 8, while some other guys would maybe squeak through based off of some good luck. And we haven't seen that from SHR recently. So they definitely need somebody to step up other than Kevin Harvick in that team. Maybe Almirola takes a step back into the round of 8 here coming up next year. Maybe whoever steps into the 14, likely Chase Briscoe surprises. I can't see that, though, from a rookie. So it's still kind of trying to build SHR from the other 3. The main guy there, Kevin Harvick, is just Kevin Harvick. He's going to do his things. But the rest of the team definitely disappointed this season. And sure, you had the consistent results from Almirola, but at the end of the day, when you only have one guy make it to the round of 8 and you're that high-end team, I think you can be pretty disappointed there.
Yeah, I think when Harvick retires, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the performance level is of that SHR camp, because
they
it
need
really
Cole
raises
Custer
it.
or Chase Briscoe to really make that next step coming soon from good prospect or top prospect, you should probably say, for them, to legitimate contender. And it's something that we haven't seen from a lot of prospects recently. It feels like, at least as of right now, Chase Elliott's really been the only one to transition from top prospect to potential championship contender. Ryan Blaney, we saw it a little bit from this year, but then
He's close.
He's just that little step behind. He's good. He's a top 10 points guy, but he's not really that championship contender yet. And we saw that based off of that catastrophic
First
round of 16.
Yeah.
When you're looking at these guys, you need Cole Custer to make that progression pretty quickly here. You need Chase Briscoe, who, even though he's older than Custer, has far fewer experience on asphalt. You need him to kind of continue this progression and make that big step up. Or maybe it's a big free agent acquisition. We don't know. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit concerning for me, given the fact that Kevin Harvick is so good and always at the front of the grid, it seems, and the rest of the team kind of lacks behind. So definitely a little bit surprising that we don't have another SHR car in the round of 8. But when you look at the rest of the lineup, it's also not all that surprising.
Yeah, it's just kind of Harvick's show for right now. And then once he's gone in a couple of years' time, they'll figure out what's next for that team. And then it'll be a new car by then as well. So lots of interesting kind of future storylines for SHR besides Kevin Harvick with Eric Almirola. I don't know if he's necessarily in that top, like I don't know if he necessarily is that, great driver that is expected of that kind of equipment. I just think he's got such great sponsorship backing that it really helps keeping him in a seat like that. And like you said, with the qualifying draw, I think that had a large part in how he performed this season. You saw it on multiple occasions where he started in the top 4 and then finished the stage in the top 5 or top 7 or so. And then that kind of propelled him for the rest of the race because other people had problems because they're starting a little bit further back and whatnot. But yeah, that's kind of the Roval race, man. It was pretty good. Definitely, I don't know. What would you say out of the 3 Roval races that we've seen so far? If you had to rank them, what would you say?
It's unfortunate because I think all 3 have been very good races, but it's probably number 3, right? When you look at, obviously, the chaos that was the first race, everybody going into the first corner, wrecking, the finish, everything involved there, the playoff implications, all of it. And then last year with Chase Elliott wrecking into turn 1 and then coming back all the way through the field and winning the race. We just didn't have that same level in this one. And the wet weather racing was great. If we got it throughout the entire race, maybe it gets a step up, but putting it 3rd is definitely not a knock on the race itself. It was still a very good race, but that bar that the Roval set was just so high. It was almost asking too much of it to try and match what the first 2 were.
Yeah, if it was the Xfinity Series race and the Cup Series race, it goes to the top of the charts even for me. It was that good, that Saturday race. I wish we just got to see a little bit more. I wish the first 2 just stages maybe were in rain, and then it transitions to dry, or even a late rain shower there at the end would have spiced things up a lot.
The big thing for me would be if the race was reversed, where it was dry for the first 3 quarters, and then there was rain at the last bit. And maybe you see
would
the
have
transition
provided some
then
very
and
excellent
stuff like
finish.
that. But then at the same time, there's an automatic caution for the rain at that point, and so you don't really get to see the tire strategy. So I don't know, but it would have been nice to see maybe a transition at the end and see the tire strategy come into play, because that's just something that we never see in NASCAR in terms of it being wet weather versus dry and the difference there. But
it's just 2 tires to 4 tires is the strategy, essentially.
That's the equivalent there. So, and then it's on a restart as well, so you don't have to worry about track position as much in terms of relative distance between cars. Obviously, track position matters, whether you're 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, etc. But it doesn't matter if you're 4 seconds back of a guy. You need to maybe undercut, go onto the dry tire quicker, and try to make up time, all that kind of stuff. I think we were robbed a little bit of that element, which is unfortunate because the radar was teasing us a little bit. It looked like with 20 laps,
they kept
15
on showing
laps to go,
it.
that maybe we would get some showers and maybe they would have to switch back and there wouldn't be a weather caution and all this kind of stuff. But I'm still very happy with how the race played out in terms of entertainment.
Yeah, I'd definitely say it's third for me as well. I just think the other two had better storylines in terms of the points gap coming into it as well, which provides an extra element there in terms of entertainment throughout the entire race, with it just being basically a must-win throughout the whole event. It just really kept your eye on one or two guys with Busch and Bowyer. If they got into the lead, it really shook things up. But other than that, it was pretty predictable in terms of what was going to happen on Sunday. So we'll move on to the notable finishes here, Kyle, before we move into Cush's threes from Sunday's race at the Roval. Joey Logano in second. Did not see really that kind of performance coming from the 22 car on Sunday. It was very difficult for Kyle to even think about points or something like that when he had his main competition always basically right there behind him or in front of him. It's in a lot of the race. So Joey Logano, as much as I don't like the guy, second place at the Roval in these kind of circumstances throughout the whole race was pretty solid nonetheless. Eric Jones, someone I told you to stay away from in fantasy. Why would I do that? I don't know after this race. Eric Jones was really, really solid. Was in the top 10 for the majority of the day and finishing third. He's not known as a road course racer whatsoever, but a great resume builder for Eric Jones and something that we've seen that he's really come into his own once again late in the season here. It seems like that's always the case with Eric Jones. If he just kept this kind of pace up throughout the whole season, Eric Jones would be a really, really consistent and round of 8, maybe potentially contender here. But unfortunately for him, he didn't even make the playoffs this season. But it seems like things are on the up for Eric Jones. Potential contract negotiations and finalizations will be coming this week, is what he's been saying. So he's been rumored the 43 car is maybe that likely landing spot for Eric Jones later this week. We'll see if there's an announcement on that for Thursday's show. But Eric Jones really providing some really solid runs here over the last 2 months for that 20 car. Kurt Busch, fourth place. He's kind of right behind Bowyer, I'd say, in those road course respects. A top 10 guy, but fourth place for Kurt Busch in a race that he didn't really need to even show up to. He can focus on next week's race at Kansas more so than this week. Really solid run there for one Busch brother with the elder one in Kurt getting a top 5. Ryan Blaney recovering from that spin there from the lead. Had to come all the way back through the pack, getting to 5th. I think he probably had the second fastest car on Sunday, but top 5 for Ryan Blaney. Keeping his, I think it's 3 consecutive top 5s then for Ryan Blaney to start his Roval career, which is really, really good to see. William Byron was in the lead throughout the entire race, was up there, had some different strategy compared to some of the other leaders, so I think that's probably why he was offset in some respects. But 6th for William Byron, really, really good run for the 24 team, as Chackenhouse's days atop of the pit box are starting to run out here as the season winds down. Martin Truex Jr., a little bit disappointing from Truex. Wasn't up there in the top 2 or 3 throughout the race, top 5 to top 10 range for sure, because he's just that good on road courses where the skill kind of takes over. But I think they were just missing a little bit on Sunday with the 19 car, but 7th is still pretty respectable nonetheless. Alex Bowman, a little bit disappointed by him as well. Had some damage, maybe that affected him in some regard there, but a top 10 for Alex Bowman at a track that he's been really, really good at so far in its short tenure on the schedule. Cole Custer, after getting spun there, I think it was in stage 3 there to start, gets a top 10 finish, signs that the Cole Custer in his rookie season is really starting to improve. Like we just talked about there with SHR, he really needs to keep that momentum going into next season to kind of carry that, kind of fill that gap that maybe that second place guy that looking for at that organization is needing. So solid run there for Cole Custer. And then the guy who we've talked about at length throughout this entire episode for multiple occasions, Clint Bowyer, gets the top 10. Absolutely exhausted when he came out of the car. The picture is going to stand out in my mind for a while here. 10th place for Clint Bowyer. Obviously not the result he probably deserved or wanted, but a top 10. It's remarkable that he even got to that point. So props to Clint Bowyer for getting a top 10 out of a very up and down day for that 14 team. Tyler Reddick, very quiet, but 12th place finish there for that team. Really, really solid run for him. Jimmy Johnson in his final race at Charlotte Motor Speedway, 13th place for himself. Not much more to say about Jimmy Johnson. I thought he was at points in the top 5, and at points he was back in the 20s. I don't know what was really going on with Jimmy Johnson on Sunday. It was kind of hard to read. I put him in the garage for fantasy, so thankfully I did that. Still 13th place for Jimmy Johnson, which is, I don't know if he'll get that last win now. I thought maybe there was a potential there earlier this season. for the fact that we need Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson to get wins here in their final kind of 4 races here, it's going to be quite the tough task. But if anything can happen in 2020, maybe those 2 things can happen. I'm still crossing my fingers that we'll get maybe 1 or 2 of those things to end out the season here, because those will be very, very cool storylines to keep track of. Ryan Preece, who led there with around 30 laps to go, finishing 14th there. Solid run for Ryan Preece, his best career finish on a road course by far. It wasn't even close. I think they mentioned a stat where he hasn't finished inside the top 20 in a road course up until this point. So really, really solid run for that 37 car. Austin Dillon recovers to get 19th after that damage from the contact with Kyle Busch. Kind of similar to Talladega, where they were recovered from damage and then they just got the best they could out of the situation. So top 20 for Austin Dillon, even though he gets eliminated from this round of the playoffs. Chris Buescher, really solid, quiet day, 20th place. Not known as much of a road course racer either, but top 20 nonetheless for himself in that 17 car. Ty Dillon, someone that we obviously won a stage, was really, really good in that first stage. The rest of the race really teetered off after that, finishing 23rd after having that spin. Never really regained that speed and form that we saw in that first stage, where he seemed like he was in a top 5 legitimate car. But 23rd for that 13 car. He's still looking for a contract for 2021. Daniel Suarez in 25th. Not too much to say about that one. It is what it is for Suarez. He kind of is consistently getting that finish now in the 25th to 28th range. He's just looking forward to the Trackhouse team next season, I'm sure, just trying to get this season over with in the 96. Greg Galding, 26th place, a name that we don't usually get to see too much, but in that 27 car, we saw him up in the top 10, maybe at some points, top 15, definitely. Went back to 26 there. Some of the top guys really regained their form, but really solid run there for that car and for that driver. Deserving of a ride here on a consistent basis, and it would be great to see him in a full-time ride in the series, something that we've mentioned on the show before. And then finally, for the notable finishers, Kyle Busch in 30th. He would have finished in the top 10 there if he hadn't had a pit, but 30th place for Kyle Busch just ends a miserable round of 12, really, for that entire team after they had issues in all 3 races. So you'll be seeing a lot less and hearing a lot less of Kyle Busch as we move forward on the show for the final 4 weeks here, as he's not really a factor anymore.
Unless if he wins a race, goes out and does the thing.
Unless he goes out there and does the thing, but you'll definitely be not having to hear me talk about Kyle Busch and my feelings about that 18 team. I've given up really on the season now. So yeah. We'll move on to Cush's threes here, Kyle. Obviously, I've talked quite a bit here throughout this last portion of the show, so take it away for your Cush's threes.
All right. Well, we'll begin Cush's threes by putting out a statement here. Chase Elliott is obviously the most impressive, but because Chase Elliott, we expect this going in, he's not taking up one of my top 3 spots. I want to highlight some other people. So, of course, Chase Elliott is the best. I just want to put that out there before we get into things. So, we'll begin Cush's threes with somebody that when we go way, way back here to the Daytona Road Course and when we were doing our fantasy preview show, I kind of highlighted him as a guy to maybe watch here at the road courses because he'd shown qualifying speed but hadn't been able to turn that into actual results. And we're starting to see those results come now here at the road courses, and that's William Byron. A very solid day, was up at the front for a little bit there with some strategy and the pit stops and everything, but stayed up in the top 10 for basically the entire day and ended up with a really, really strong finish of 6th here. So a very strong day for William Byron as he's starting to really, really become a very strong road course guy. Finished top 10 at the Daytona Road Course. I believe he finished 6th as well last year at the Roval. So that's back-to-back-to-back top 10s at road courses. And this is a guy that in previous, when we actually had qualifying, was able to be on the front row at different road courses. So he's got that single run speed. We know that in the past, and he's starting to turn that into good finishes, which is nothing but a great sign for a very, very young driver in William Byron. And it's clear to show that the program that Hendrick Motorsports has for their young drivers, turning them into road course guys, is working very well, because it's obviously worked astronomically for Chase Elliott, and it's starting to work here for William Byron as well. So shout out to Willie B for my first one. Number 2 here, it's an easy one for me. Driver of the day, even though Chase Elliott was so good, it's got to be Clint Bowyer, man. He was so good throughout this race. And the fact that he lost power steering and was still able to go out and finish top 10 at a road course is mind-blowing to me. I don't know how he was able to do that, both physically and just pure skill. Like this guy, I am sorry for sleeping on him earlier this year at the road course. I did not realize the numbers. I apologize for that. I'm a Clint Bowyer stan now. It's insane. And you saw the images of him after the race, slumped, sitting down next to the car. A heartbreaking image, obviously, given the news that we know this week and the fact that this is going to be his final full-time season, stepping into the booth, obviously, as we talked about already, and he gave it everything he had and more in this one. So a shout out to Clint Bowyer for somehow getting a top 10 when he probably shouldn't have been finishing this race at all. So Clint Bowyer, shout out to him. And finally here on the positive side, Timmy Hill, man, a 5th place finish in a stage in that equipment. I don't care what the situation is. That should not be happening. And the fact that it was a restart, there was strategy, obviously, to have him in that position. But the fact that he was able to hold on to that position in that final lap is crazy. There's no reason why that car should be able to stay in 5th throughout an entire lap at a road course going to the end of the stage. Like, that's craziness to me. So shout out to Timmy Hill. It was unfortunate the finish obviously had an engine issue right after that. So they ended up finishing last, which is not deserved whatsoever. So shout out to Timmy Hill for getting what has got to be the first ever stage finish for that team. And just before we move on to the negative side of things, I want to give one other shout out, not in the Cush's threes, but he still gets a shout out from me regardless. And that's Alex Bowman, another very strong performance from him at the Roval. But more importantly, he was open about the anxiety issues that he's had, specifically going into this week, the stress that was on his shoulders. On Twitter, we kind of saw that made fun of, played around with by a certain reporter, which is inexcusable. It's something that we shouldn't see, and it's great to see that both Bowman and sponsors as well have kind of stood up and been like, it's okay to be like this. It's almost normal to be like this. We shouldn't have the stigma against any mental illnesses, and it was really refreshing to see somebody like Alex Bowman kind of talk openly about his anxiety issues in what is absolutely a situation where any normal person would have crazy stress levels and obviously anxiety going into things. So I wanted to give that shout out as well before we move on here and make sure that we add that in here.
He deserves it.
On the negative side of things, absolutely. We'll begin with Michael McDowell. I was kind of expecting big things from him going into this weekend, whether that be the wet weather or just the road course in general. And we didn't really see him in contention whatsoever in this one. I don't know if they had any issues or whatever. Obviously, we saw him spin a couple times there, which was kind of funny to see. But it just wasn't that same kind of Michael McDowell performance that we're kind of used to seeing. And we saw him do very, very well at the Daytona road course earlier this year and didn't really back that one up this time. So I was a little disappointed by that. And kind of similarly, or a little bit different, but it's unfortunate to say because he got a good stage finish at one point. But Ryan Newman, for the amount of times that we saw that car on TV for spinning and not being in a good position, like how many incidents was he a part of? Like
they lost track. Like
legitimately
was like, oh, we spun again.
plus.
I thought it was somebody else.
It's kind of crazy.
Bad.
So Newman, it's unfortunate. He's had a rough season. But when you spin that many times, I'm sorry, there's not much I can do to help you out there. So Ryan Newman had to end up on this one. And finally here, it pains me to do so, but after a big week when he got the contract extension that we maybe weren't expecting, going out to the road course where he's had some positive results in the past, and another dud here for Matt DiBenedetto. Obviously looked really good in that first stage with some of the strategy call. But then the rest of the race just didn't go their way. And again, I don't know if they had issues or whatever, but the fact that last year in Levine Family Racing Equipment, he had 2 top 10 finishes at road courses and was just outside the top 10 at the Roval, I do believe, with an 11th place finish. This time around, he's got 2 finishes of well outside the top 15 for both of them. So unfortunate there, given the upgrade in equipment. We were kind of expecting to see DiBenedetto challenge for maybe some top fives, maybe even challenge for wins at road courses this year, and it didn't come. So I don't know what happened there, whether they once again missed the setup, even though they looked good early on, whether they had issues later on. Just a disappointing year on the road courses from DiBenedetto. So he's the final one in Cush's Threes for me. So that's going to do it for this final road course edition of Cush's Threes for the 2020 season as we move on here to the round of 8.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with one of your selections. It's the Matt DiBenedetto one. I feel like Brad Keselowski should have been in your negative side of things. I was very disappointed by the 2-car on Sunday. I thought he would have been up there in the top 10. He took the lead on the first lap. I immediately regretted my decision on not putting him in my lineup, but then I'm glad in retrospect that I didn't. But I'm surprised by the 2-car's performance, especially considering where his teammates were this past weekend. So I don't disagree in terms of DiBenedetto being on the negative side of things. I just think Keselowski was just a little bit more disappointing compared to what we've seen in the past from the 2-car. But I respect your decisions. They all make sense to me. Just that little tidbit in there. So any final thoughts here from the Cup Series race before we move into the Xfinity Series race?
A little bit of a letdown given the massive lofty expectations we maybe had of potential rain and everything. But at the end of the day, it was still a very solid race, very deserving to be the ending race of the round. And we transition here to the round of 8 with a very interesting group of 8 drivers, somebody that we weren't expecting, and Kurt Busch sneaking his way through with a very solid round, a pretty strong showing at the Roval as well, a sneaky good performance there. And we'll see how things play out in this round of 8. I'm sure that the racing gods have a couple more surprises hidden up their sleeves, but starting to get down to crunch time here after a couple rounds where we didn't have to really think about Denny Hamlin or Kevin Harvick whatsoever. They actually kind of matter once again. So it's going to be fun to see how things play out here as we kind of hit to crunch time here in the NASCAR season.
Yeah, we'll talk about our round of 8 predictions later this week on the Thursday edition of the show, so stay tuned for that. But to keep this episode somewhat respectable in length, we'll move on here to the Xfinity Series. This race was basically the opposite in terms of the Cup Series race. Started in the dry and went to torrential downpour in the wet. It was the probably top 3 craziest races I've ever seen. It's got to be up there for sure. Like across the board, the Xfinity Series race, I wish it was the Cup Series race by far. It was an incredible race to watch. There's too many spins, too many incidents to even keep track of remotely. It's not even close. But we'll touch on the major ones, just kind of go back and forth here, Kyle. We're not going to go in order here and how things happened. It will just go back and forth. So just like I said, though, started in the dry, but then it quickly went to the wet. There's sprinkles basically under the first caution there. And then it went on from there. Total chaos. These drivers, obviously, they don't really know how to deal with the wet. The Xfinity Series has had more wet races over the past decade or so. They've had a couple in there. Not too many, but still a couple. Just quickly on the Cup Series, Logano did race in the Xfinity Series on the way at Watkins Glen and won the race. I think that partially had a little bit.
He was also in the wet at Montreal back in the day.
Yeah, and I think that just that little bit of experience there really paid off in the early portion of it. But we'll move on to the Xfinity Series here. I won't talk about the Cup Series anymore.
Wish we got to see Carl Edwards do a wet race in the Cup Series.
Oh, my God.
Quickly there. The throwback clip. Sorry, I just remember the Montreal race now. The throwback clip of him having the Swiffer trying to clean up the windshield. Like, that's an all-time clip.
The squeegee, not the Swiffer. The squeegee.
Yeah, it was something. Whatever.
The Swiffer's the duster, man. What the heck are you talking about?
He had something there. It wasn't a squeegee. It was something weird. I don't know.
It's a squeegee. It's what you.
No, it definitely wasn't just a squeegee. It wasn't just a squeegee. I don't know.
You can look it up a picture. We'll see what we got.
I swear it was like a cloth or something. I don't know.
It was. We'll talk about the Xfinity Series race.
We'll actually talk about the Xfinity race now.
It was pouring rain. Cars were hydroplaning everywhere. There was once it really started to downpour, the leader spun and Gregson, a couple of others, Chastain spun. I remember a crazy 3-car pileup went into turn 3. Timmy Hill and then one guy came in at the end. I forget who the other 2 were. I don't know if you remember them, but it was, I think, the 47 car. Kyle Weatherman was in there, wasn't he?
Austin Hill was in there. Like there's a bunch of names. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very, very interesting wreck. All three just went into the same spot in that treacherous turn 5 area. Kaz Gralla won stage 1 as well, so that was pretty interesting to watch. Someone that ran the road course race, obviously for Austin Dillon in replacement at Daytona earlier this season, comes in and wins stage 1 in the soaking wet at the Roval. So Riley Herbst taking out Gregson was an interesting storyline to watch as well. The red flag hit. We were expecting maybe some fisticuffs. It was very, very funny timing with the camera, with Herbst running for shelter as Gregson seemed like he was stomping up pit road. It was very, very cool.
That was a really funny side-by-side.
Good camera cut there by the director. It was very, very funny. But it made sense with Herbst. Some payback for something that happened at Texas earlier this season where Gregson just wiped them out for no reason early on in the race. It was kind of due for Gregson to have something bad to him from the Herbst end of things. Gregson has had a tumultuous season in terms of lots of incidents. Obviously, the one with Harrison Burton comes to mind at Kentucky as well. It's been up and down for Gregson in terms of stuff that's happened on the track. So the red flag happened for rain. Then a crazy restart after that. The leader, Allgaier spun. Herbst got wrecked by Allmendinger. Haley got in it. It was absolute chaos. It's so hard to really put into words what happened in this race. Brandon Brown had one of the most spectacular wrecks I've ever seen with the big shower of water after he got into the grass. It was a crazy camera angle. That guy deserves a race for getting that shot. But first off, the entire camera crew that did the race there in the torrential downpour. Props to you. I wish they gave him a shout out on the broadcast because I'm surprised that they didn't. They deserve one for sure.
So getting the shots through the rain when you can barely see, bravo.
It was very, very cool to watch. So thanks for giving us quite the show at home. It will not be dismissed or without notice that you did all that great work this past weekend for the Xfinity Series race in basically a hurricane.
That's really what
it was nuts. There's obviously with the Roval here, Kyle. It's not really built for the rain. The drainage system and everything like that. It's basically built for the dry. And you could definitely see that coming into play with one drain specifically getting one camera shot. A lot of times that thing went through a horror show, basically. So much rain went down that one drain. But, we'll talk about the winner here in a second. But just the race as a whole, it was absolutely chaotic with the rain and the puddles that were forming and the lines that people had to run, how cautious they had to be. And there was a couple favorites, definitely with your Chase Briscoe and AJ Allmendinger. Gregson kind of got into the mix there as well. But other than that, it was basically feast or famine for a lot of these guys.
Yeah, it was just an unbelievable show. Obviously, there were some sloppy moments, which mainly were when the rain first really started to hit hard and kind of 8 people went off at the same time. But when they kind of got a slight handle of the rain, it was an amazing product because you really got to see driver skill on display because anytime that they would touch that throttle, they were swirly. It was really unbelievable, and it was kind of cool to see different people when they were willing to kind of risk things. Noah Gragson the entire race, basically, going 3 wide up places, a bunch of different stuff. It was just something that we really have never seen to that degree in NASCAR. And something that we haven't seen in this kind of way in a really, really long time. So it was just a fantastic show. And the best part about it was really you never knew what would happen. Somebody could have a 10-second lead up front, and if they maybe slip up for a half second, break a little bit too late, anything, you're sailing it into those corners in those conditions. And we saw that with different people like Gregson spinning out from the lead. The incident with Herbst, once again, Gregson at the front. And obviously on that final restart, Chase Briscoe, as he put it, pushing 110% instead of just 100 there. It was just remarkable because at any time anybody could have anything happen. And one thing I was a little surprised about was the fact that Austin Cindric really wasn't a factor.
Okay, I'm glad you pointed this out. I wanted to really discuss this because I was flabbergasted that he was nowhere. He came up through the pack very early on, came into the top 5, but once it got to the rain, he seemed really out of his element.
It was kind of stunning. And I don't know if it was him maybe just taking it easy, not trying to do too much or whatever it was, but if you think about the reputation that he has on road courses and kind of the background that he has as well, doing endurance races and everything as well, you would have
He's the
thought
Chase
that
Elliott of the Xfinity series, right? That's what we've kind of come to know him
that's
as,
kind of the
but-
reputation he has, to the point where people are talking about where when he steps in a Cup Series car, he's an immediate favorite to win road course races. And I am kind of a little bit more soft on him, where I don't necessarily know if he'll step in and immediately be that threat. And it's races like this that kind of give me that apprehension, where it's almost something that should put it in his favor even more, because it's making it uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's something that you assume that he'd have experience with, having done prototype cars and stuff like that, where you would expect to be in rain at points. And he wasn't a factor in this race, which was really surprising to me, because somebody that has less experience in Chase Briscoe seemed to do pretty okay with it. Obviously, he had one spin early on in the rain, but then he started to get a handle of it. And then at the end, just pushed a little too hard going for the win. But Cindric, once it got to the wet, was never a factor for the lead, which was shocking to me.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed it out, though. Like, I thought that was one
something the
storyline
broadcast
that
didn't
went.
talk about at all.
Oh God, it just drives me nuts. Like, I want to just like text him and be like, "Hey, can
Because
you point this out?"
the entire lead up, the entire pre-race in the
I
first like
know.
15 laps is all, this guy's
Austin
incredible.
Cindric is this.
Austin
Cindric's that.
and they didn't talk about the fact that he wasn't his usual self at a road course in this race, which was, I think, a missed opportunity to maybe
The laps went long enough. You could talk about 5 different storylines on one lap. So I think.
Well, geez, there was so much going on, you almost couldn't. It was kind of crazy.
That's true.
And like we have the gripe about the mid-tier cars not getting enough attention, and Alex Labbe being a top 5 guy the entire day did not get enough attention. The
Holy
fact that,
smoly!
Like, obviously, it was unfortunate him pushing a little too hard there after passing for third, I believe it was, for second, and spinning out right after that, which was a bit heartbreaking because I wanted to see him get. But again,
he could have won. He totally could have won.
I think he finished the day with something like 49 points. Finished
he finished third in both stages, and then finished fourth. It was an incredible race for Alex Labbe.
Unbelievable day, and
he was the best. He got the most points at anybody. It was
insane. A DGM car at a non-super speedway, even at a super speedway race.
No,
I'd be impressed.
Gregson got the most points.
But what was the difference? Like 1 point?
Yeah, it was very. Gregson got staged.
Regardless.
Gregson got second in stage 2 and second at the race. And where are you getting stage 1? Second. So he got the most points. Gregson gets the most points, but Labbe gets second most points.
Like, come on. Let's give the Canucks some love here. And it would have been a great way to potentially even tie in Lassard's win from last week, but that's just
why would they
being biased and whatnot. But no, like,
good old Canadian kid.
He deserved more recognition there, and it's kind of a bit of a tangent here. Sorry, it's a gripe that I have with a lot of the production of NASCAR and the TV, because everything is so focused on the sponsorship and everything in NASCAR, especially for the survival of those mid-tier teams. And when the broadcast just ignores them, even when they have good days, like, I don't know how they can be expected to get the sponsorship when they're not shown enough. Whether it's mid-pack battles that are exciting or small teams being up at the front, they're just not focused on enough. So that's my little tangent there. Even in the Cup Series race, I felt like we saw Denny Hamlin spinning or wrecking more often than we did some of those mid-tier guys that were having good days and whatnot. So that's my little small rant for the day.
I feel like they have to get to the lead in order to justify them getting some attention. You know what I mean?
And
like
even
Ty
then,
Dillon,
it's like
Ty Dillon got
mention.
some attention, right? You know, in the lead.
Jimmy
Great
Hill
run by Ty
finished
Dillon.
5th in a stage, and he got mentioned going into commercial break. Like,
disappointing. I think it just comes down to who's leading the broadcast team. Rick Allen, I'm looking at you, man. I don't want to be the guy that hates on a fellow sport media person, but I think it's justified in some respect what he's done over his body of work with NBC over the past 5-6 seasons, whatever it's been since they've taken over for the second half of the season. I think they need a more powerful, stronger guy that can lead the conversation and points out those kind of things because they really, really deserve it. And I saw a lot of people early on, it did get a little too out of place at the beginning with the rain and some guys just getting, there's too many incidents, too many spins for some people to enjoy it.
Yeah.
As a Canadian, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand it. I feel like I tweeted this out. I was Absolutely, Bob Pockrass before the race started. I don't really want to see them
Oh,
race in the rain kind of thing, and it doesn't really showcase driver skill. I couldn't disagree with you more there, Bob. I love what you do for the sport and everything. You're one of the greatest insiders across all sports, really. I just think that you missed the mark on that take. I think it exhibits driver skill even more so. Maybe it may not be the traditional driver skill that we see on the oval, but it's a driver's skill nonetheless. And the guys who know how to drive, they came up to the front, and that's no joke. Whether that's you're more familiar with these sort of conditions, maybe not necessarily in a stock car, but in an endurance car for Allmendinger, you're looking at someone like him specifically racing a lot of endurance races in the wet and stuff like that. But I didn't understand the kind of gripe that people had with it racing in the rain kind of thing. I know it got a little bit out of hand at some points with the rain specifically coming down in
that's
buckets.
up to the driver. That's up to the driver to know the limits and not go over them. That's not up to the sport for allowing them to race in those conditions. You're racing on the rain tires, so you should be expected to control the car in the rain. And yes, it was torrential downpour, and it's something that not anybody would have maybe had experience on, except save for a couple guys. But it's your job to ride the line and not go over it. No different than at an oval when it's completely dry. It's your job to go into the corner as fast as you can, but not go over the line. You're able to do it all the other places. Why aren't you able to do it in the rain? And so I completely agree with you. I feel like maybe Pockrass was maybe just kind of trying to shine the light on the lack of practice time and maybe just kind of be like, they shouldn't be racing in the rain for the first time in the Cup Series with all that money on the line, all that kind of stuff, which maybe I could hear that argument a little bit more, but I couldn't disagree more in the fact that they shouldn't race in the rain. They absolutely should.
No matter what, if it's on a road course, you have to race in the rain.
Yeah, exactly. Unless it's like brutal conditions, which even when they did red flag it for a bit there, I felt like you probably could have still gone there. But yeah, I feel like the critics there were maybe a little too extreme. And I really don't see how you watch that race and don't come out of it being, wow, Chase Briscoe, AJ Allmendinger, Alex Labbe are incredibly talented drivers and not be like, I don't know how. So a fantastic display of performance from a lot of those drivers in the Xfinity Series. And hopefully we see a handful of rain races next year. Because it seems like every single time that we're at an oval, at least earlier this season, we were getting rain, and every time that we've gone to a road course in the Cup Series for forever, it was bone dry. So it was nice to finally mix that in. Hopefully we can get some nice wet weather races next year with 6 on the calendar.
I'm looking at you, Road America.
Plus a 7th there to begin the year at the Clash. So we got 7 opportunities. Let's hope we can at least get one more.
Come on, Mother Nature. Give it to me. I can't agree with you more, though. Across the board here, I think we are basically in unison in our thoughts on rain racing and on road courses. It just provides it's not that it doesn't take a skill set. It's just a new skill set that maybe drivers have not been exposed to. And I think that's important
and I think
to see.
that a lot of it probably comes from, at least the fans that maybe weren't huge on it, probably comes from the people that only know NASCAR.
Are in Arizona. No, sorry.
But no, it's probably the people that only know NASCAR. And it's not something that they're used to or expect them to be good at, versus people who watch all kinds of motorsports and expect it in the other series, and the only one that doesn't is NASCAR. So it's probably a bit of that as well. But hopefully we can get lucky with some rain races in the future here, and it can maybe become part of the norm rather than this crazy outlandish one-off thing.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think we've mentioned it, but AJ Allmendinger won this race. Exceptional performance. Briscoe seemed like he had the race in hand. He was probably faster than Allmendinger later in the going there. Just had that mistake on the final restart where he got into a puddle, hydroplated a little bit, and spun the thing around, and Allmendinger was basically set sail from there on the final couple of laps there. But deservedly so. Allmendinger has been... when you look at something like this for a Cup Series for 6 road course races next season, do you maybe look at AJ Allmendinger as like a part-time kind of guy to get maybe sneaky a top 10 or something? He's definitely proven himself. Austin Dillon did not pull that strategy with RCR, with Allmendinger coming into the car for the Sunday race. Maybe that could have happened, but Allmendinger gets the win on the Saturday in the rain. He was it got pretty dark there, the infield section, as well as the red flag didn't help with that. It's later on the East Coast, obviously, and they didn't have the lighting where it was very visible. He said after the race, the biggest jumbotron in the world didn't help either with the glare, but he survived all the conditions, both external and internal, and very, very solid running from AJ Allmendinger on Saturday. On a very entertaining race, 10 out of 10 for myself. I can't even look at the spins early on where they couldn't come to grips with it right out of the gate as an issue at all. I think it's just part of the learning curve for those guys, and they'll take that moving forward if they have another wet race, which will be very, very helpful for them in the future. We'll move on to the notable finishers here. Gregson in second, like we talked about. Hemrick in third. Starting to come around here for Daniel Hemrick, getting a little bit more luck for the 8 car, specifically himself. It's been a rough couple of seasons for him, so it's nice to see him putting together some finishes. Alex Labay, like we've talked about, the Canadian, getting fourth. Great weekend for Canada for that side of things, not just in racing but across the board in many other sports as well. Ross Chastain comes home fifth. Didn't have to worry about Ross Chastain. Maybe he was having some issues there early on, but the playoff bubble really never came close at the end of things. He did a great job to stay ahead of that playoff cut line. Austin Cindric still sixth, but disappointing to not see him up there in the top three after what we've set the high expectations for him. And we'll start off with our big surprise of the day here with Cody Ware in seventh place.
How about that? What?
I don't know what else you could say about that, but Cody Ware in seventh place. I know it's the Xfinity Series, but in torrential rain, that's pretty damn good. Thoughts, Kyle, on Cody Ware getting seventh and Jay Buford getting eighth and Jeffrey Earnhardt 11th. What are your thoughts on those three guys? Because those are the standouts.
Well, for starters, it was a Rick Ware Xfinity car, which I don't know how much we've seen that this year, if at all, really. And Cody Ware, man, goes out and finishes seventh. I still don't know how he did it. A remarkable performance from him. And this is coming off of a Talladega race where he was up in like the top 10 a little bit there as well. Obviously didn't have the great finish because it's a Rick Ware car. And as soon as the green flags drop, they're obligated to go to the back of the pack. Sorry. He finished 19th when they were like up in the top. I'm sorry. But no, an incredible showing from Cody Ware. And let's get this guy in the car a little bit more. Who knows? But a seventh place finish. Are you joking me? And obviously Jade Buford, I believe is somebody that's come over from that has experience in the maybe not necessarily wet weather road course style of racing. Just looking here, let's see, a bunch of different stuff here. And then just kind of taking a bit of a foray into NASCAR this year, running at the road courses for SS Greenlight Racing and then JD Motorsports as well at Road America. So, and he's done pretty well there in those as well. He's picked up some stage points over the year, got his best finish of the year, finishing 8th at the Roval, but 14th, 16th, and 19th is nothing to scoff at either, given the equipment that he's in this season. So maybe we get to see him in some road courses some more. Obviously, we don't get to see the same level of road course ringers that we did in the past, just given kind of the restrictions on the amount of cars you can enter specifically at the Cup Series level. We don't see your same Boris Seds or anything like that race really all that much anymore, which is unfortunate. Those were always fun to see, but those prospects have rounded up their game to include road course racing anymore. So it's not like in years past, long ago now at this point, where a road course ringer could come into a NASCAR race and be up in the top three. We've seen a handful of guys this year go in and kind of struggle a little bit, whether you look at back at the Daytona road course when Earl Bamber stepped in and struggled a little bit for RCR at the Xfinity level. And then obviously Alex Tagliani, the Canadian, struggled a little bit for Kyle Busch Motorsports as well. So it was kind of interesting to see those as well. But shout out to Cody Ware and Jade Buford, a couple of fantastic performances there.
Yeah, and Jeffrey Earnhardt finishing 11th there as well. That's really, really solid for him.
Yeah.
Riley Herbst in 12th had up and
I don't
down
know
days,
how
that's for
he
sure.
still
That
finished
car was
12th.
destroyed,
Yeah.
but it's still 12th for Riley Herbst.
He's avoided the wrath of Noah Gragson for now.
Yeah, I doubt Gregson was pretty vocal in his post race on how he felt about him. So we'll see what happens for Riley Herbst's future. We talked about that last week on the show with the 18 car with the Xfinity Series program next season. So his future's up in the air right now, but he showed some real promise on Saturday, whether that was leading and coming up through the field there or still getting a top 15 finish with all that damage and all the incidents that he had. So solid day for Riley Herbst. He's still eliminated from the round of 12. Josh Bilecki, our guy in 13th. Solid run for him. We love this guy for obvious reasons, like in our post on Instagram, and just being a great guy that gets these solid finishes here and there. It's really, really cool to see Josh Bilecki getting a top 15 at the Roval. Myatt Schneider, in 14th. Joe Graf Jr. 15th. Ryan Vargas. Here it is, Kyle. This is it. We're going to get a confirmation of the order of the TikTok shirt coming soon to a store near you with Ryan Vargas. This shirt going to make a debut on the show, I'm sure, in due time, with him getting the 20th finish, 20th and above finish that we set for him last week, that he needs to get in order for Kyle to get the TikTok shirt. He's accomplished that goal 1 week after we set it for him. So really, really solid to see Ryan Vargas getting a top 20. Obviously, he said he would have liked more, but Kyle will obviously take that to get that great shirt that we'll see soon. We'll talk about that in a second here. Kyle Briscoe in 18th, Timmy Hill in 19th, keeping that kind of really solid weekend overall. Obviously not the Sunday finish, but Sunday first stage was really good for him. 19th in the Xfinity Series race. And Cody Vanderwall finishing 20th. That rounds out my notable finishers there. But going back to Vargas, Kyle, can we expect a purchase very, very soon for a TikTok shirt that is going to look very, very nice on camera?
100%. It's not in the mail yet, but the order will be placed basically as soon as we're done recording here. I'll make sure we get a nice little clip in an Instagram post for that one. But hey, I set it out. If he gets a top 20 finish, that car is just too damn nice to not get a shirt. I like supporting some guys like Ryan Vargas, who have done great things on social media to both boost his own brand and help the sport as well. And when he goes out and gets a TikTok sponsorship, I gotta rep him as well. So the shirt's so nice. I love the kind of throwback design. The colors look great. He needed to get that top 20 finish, and he goes out and gets it in the first time out. So that shirt will be in the mail shortly.
Good job, Ryan Vargas. Thank you for giving Kyle
hey,
$30 less in his bank account.
It was probably going to be more than that with conversion rate, but it's not going to be good. But hey, you know what? It's a nice looking shirt. We can stomach it. But hey, he's got 4 more races the rest of the season to kind of show his worth at the Xfinity Series level, and who knows what he can parlay that into next year. Obviously, part-time for much of the season with JD Motorsports has turned that into a 6 race schedule here at the end of the season with that sponsorship, and let's see what he can do next year. Maybe get that full-time ride that he's been looking for a couple of years.
For sure. Can't agree with you more there. And then finally, Harrison Burton, Brandon Brown, Michael Annett, and Riley Herbst are all eliminated from the Xfinity Series playoffs, something that we predicted. We got a lot of predictions right this weekend with the 4 guys staying below the cutoff line coming into both series, leaving the same way. It was just too much to ask for someone like Harrison Burton to point his way in. Seemed like he was strong there early in the first stage, just didn't quite get the finish there. Brandon Brown looked solid at times as well. That wreck there at the end really cost him, but I think overall Brandon Brown could take the season as a huge step in the right direction. Very, very solid. Michael Annett, just disappointing overall. I think it's a wasted ride there over at Junior Motorsports, to be honest. It's just that money that he gets from the sponsorships that really keeps that car going, and for himself to stay in a ride as good as a Junior Motorsports #1 car is. And Riley Herbst, his speculation up in the air, his future's up in the air. We'll see what happens with the 18 car. So any final thoughts here, Kyle, from the elimination race before we move into Formula One here? Obviously, we've gone on for a while here, but it's deservedly so, but we'll try and wrap it up here pretty try and get it into a decent amount of time here. But final thoughts here with the Xfinity Series race.
Yeah, just the final thing here was incredible race to watch. And just quickly on Brandon Brown, last year 15th place in points, this year makes the playoffs, and for a second there was actually in on points in that last race, which is kind of remarkable. So a great progression from a small family-owned team there. We've heard about their story plenty on the broadcast this year, and rightfully so. It's been fantastic to watch them kind of punch above their weight class this year. And we kind of get to see that once again in this next round, just with Ryan Seed kind of being the focal point, being the family-owned team looking to somehow make their way into the championship for. It's going to be a long shot for sure, but they've shown speed these last couple races, so who knows. But fantastic race, and let's get on to a race that I wish had that much rain.
Yeah, that's for sure. Very, very solid Xfinity Series race. Definitely one of my favorites I've ever seen in that series, let alone across NASCAR, across the board. So props to NASCAR for letting them run the race itself, and hopefully there's more wet weather races in the future. But that kind of wraps up the NASCAR side of things, and we'll move on to Formula One here, Kyle, for a record-breaking weekend potentially, and quite the different storylines throughout the entire weekend as a whole. Obviously, the Friday practice sessions, unfortunately, were canceled due to weather. Mick Schumacher and Callum Ilott, obviously were expected to make their highly anticipated debuts for Alfa Romeo and Haas F1 team in FP1, but with the cancellation due to poor weather, they were not able to make those debuts. So that's unfortunate. We spent some time talking about them the last couple of weeks since that's been announced. So I'm sure that they'll find some time maybe later on in the season to put them in a car for a practice session. It would have been nice to see Schumacher in a car at the German Grand Prix this past weekend, but I'm sure that time will be coming soon enough for him to make his debut in real life on the track itself, on the grid, on the Sunday race. We'll move on to qualifying here as Lance Stroll was feeling ill on Saturday prior to FP1, I guess you could say FP3 in retrospect, but forcing another replacement driver for Racing Point this season. Obviously, Sergio Perez got COVID-19 earlier this season for the British Grand Prix, forcing him to miss time. And this time we have the same replacement driver as the Hulk, Nico Hülkenberg. Another crazy weekend for him in an unexpected turn of events, making a return back to the grid and coming back to his home Grand Prix as well, which is a really nice touch. He replaces Lance Stroll for the remainder of the weekend. Stroll was just feeling ill, so they played it safe and they put Hülkenberg in the car. Unfortunately for Nico, he missed the practice because of just him jetting to the track and having to get into the car in a seat fitting and make sure everything was comfortable for him. So he went into qualifying basically blind to an extent. He's raced at the track before. There's some familiarity there, but with the car and no practice time, it was hard to expect Hülkenberg to get out of Q1, and unfortunately that was not the case for him. But overall, a positive weekend for Nico Hülkenberg, showing that he should be on the grid for next season. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. As we'll move on to Q1 here with Antonio Giovinazzi finally getting out of Q1 for the first time this season, with Hülkenberg obviously a Racing Point that is expected to be outside of that bottom five, not in that position this weekend, with Hülkenberg for qualifying, with Grosjean, Russell, Latifi, Raikkonen, and Hülkenberg all out in Q1. Vettel, Gasly, Kvyat, Giovinazzi, and Magnussen all out in Q2. Moving on to Q3 with Max Verstappen having provisional pole before the final runs, potentially getting a first pole outside of the Mercedes duo this season. It was unfortunately not to be the case, as Valtteri Bottas wins the pole for the Eiffel Grand Prix with an astonishing lap over Lewis Hamilton, I might add. 0.2 faster than his teammate. Very, very solid running from Bottas after that win in Russia a couple weeks back. Hamilton, obviously the storyline coming into this weekend, going for that record-tying 91st career win. And starting on pole would have done him wonders, but he starts second, and Verstappen gets nicked by the two Mercedes on the final run there, with finishing third there. Really solid run for Max Verstappen, though. That can't be understated enough. That team is taking steps in the right direction. If they would just start as good as they would finish, it reminds me of Eric Jones in the Cup Series side of things. If they would just start as good as they finish in terms of the season, they just kind of get slowly underway. If they can keep that pace up at the end of the season with, we would have one heck of a championship battle. But Verstappen qualifies third, followed by Leclerc with an astonishing lap in P4 to out-qualify Albon and the other Red Bull. You think he would have done well enough to get P4. Leclerc nips him there for that position. Albon still P5. Ricciardo 6th, Ocon 7th, Norris 8th, Perez 9th, and Carlos Sainz completes the top 10. So that sets up for a very exciting and potentially chaotic race on Sunday. Not the incidents that maybe we were expecting, but some reliability issues for sure on the Sunday. But
I was not expecting that.
Going into the Sunday, Kyle, obviously we had the storyline of Hamilton, but also Kimi Räikkönen setting a new F1 record of 323 starts, passing the all-time record set by Rubens Barrichello. Kimi acts like it's not a big deal, but that is a really cool accomplishment for the Iceman. The fact that he's been around this long, he took a couple of seasons off even, the fact he could have had more by now is pretty incredible to really comprehend. But going into the Sunday here, along with that storyline with Hamilton and Räikkönen, but your overall thoughts coming into a very unfamiliar track for a lot of these guys at the Nürburgring.
Yeah, it didn't seem like we were going to get that rain that we were maybe hoping for, which was a little bit disappointing, given that we had so much that it rained out all of Friday. And then we didn't get it the rest of the weekend, which kind of sucked. But going into the race, it was kind of obviously the storyline of, can Hamilton get the win from second on the grid? What can Bottas do from pole? And then what will happen in that the rest of the pack? Obviously, Verstappen there, could he challenge for the win, and who would basically get best of the rest? So was very, very interesting going into that race, and was not expecting necessarily how it played out with the reliability issues. Maybe I was expecting maybe a couple of incidents given the kind of unfamiliarity with a lot of the drivers with the track. In that car specifically, but it kind of seemed like it was almost the engineers that kind of missed the mark for a lot of them, and we saw specifically Lando Norris switched out his power supply and then had it go down again. So a bunch of different stuff there on watching on the Sunday, and obviously Nico Hülkenberg coming from the back as well. Could he get up in the points once again? So it was very interested to see how this one would play out at the Nürburgring on Sunday morning.
Yeah, too many storylines to really keep track of that.
There was a lot
to fruition at this race. Hamilton gets off to a great start, but Bottas just manages to stay ahead. Hamilton pushed his teammate wide, it seemed, in turn one to try and get ahead with a little cheeky move up the inside. Bottas recovered, and with a little bit of argy-bargy stuff, as they would like to say in Britain. The Finn driver keeps the lead ahead of Hamilton. It seemed like Bottas was off to a really, really solid start. Pulled away there on the first lap. Seemed like he had a comfortable pace, but then Hamilton started to really get into form here as the race went on. Vettel, half spins on the first corner, comes into the pits. Unfortunate for Vettel at his home Grand Prix. Then Hamilton passes Bottas on lap 12 after Bottas locks up into turn one. And that would just be the end of the day, really, for the Finn, as it would get no better for that Mercedes driver. Russell is forced to retire after major contact with Kimi Räikkönen, sending the Williams driver airborne. It was a wreck we've seen very similarly at Bahrain, I think of, going into that first corner kind of thing with just contact into the left rear or the right rear tire, and then they just go up in the air. And it was unfortunate for George Russell, another retirement for himself, just not getting the luck that he's really deserving of this season. But Räikkönen would get a 10-second time penalty because of that collision. Danny Kvyat misses the last chicane kind of after pressure from Alex Albon, and then when he comes back up on the track, Albon on the fresher tires seems like he's clear, but he's not entirely clear. And then Danny Kvyat's front wing is basically just destroyed and falls right off of the car. And that was just unfortunate for both drivers. Albon would get a 5-second time penalty, and he would later retire from the race as well. So unfortunate for him. And then for Valtteri Bottas, obviously Hamilton's main rival, mostly for the day, loses power on lap 19 and is forced to retire, something that we rarely see from a Mercedes car, that they retire from a reliability issue. And unfortunately, it was Bottas's turn to end up in the garage early than he would have definitely wanted to be for sure on Sunday. Ocon also retired due to reliability issues. It was just kind of the story of the race. There was no real incidents in terms of contact besides the Russell thing and Albon. It was just reliability issues, unfortunately, for a lot of these guys out of their control. As Kyle mentioned earlier with Lando Norris, he loses power the lap after all that chaotic stuff with Albon and Ocon retiring. Norris's reliability issues happened the lap after that, and he fell back through the field after working his way up to P3, unfortunately for him. He would have worked potentially on for a podium for himself, his second career one, but it was not to be the case for Lando Norris. Another snake-bitten weekend for him. It seems to happen a lot for that kid, unfortunately. We all love Lando Norris. How can you not? But he would retire the car on lap 44, forcing a safety car. Basically a replica image of Lando in a chair, similar to Fernando Alonso's iconic image that he's so often known as for the meme with him lying back, sunbathing basically in the chair. Lando Norris a little bit under a tent kind of thing in a chair after all that incidents there. But unfortunate there for Lando. But they had a safety car, and Hamilton would just kind of control the race for the majority of it. And record tying win for Lewis Hamilton at the Eiffel Grand Prix. He ties the all-time record of 91 wins set by the German great Michael Schumacher. And obviously this was something that we expected to happen for quite a while. We thought he could hit this mark this season given his previous success with Mercedes and how dominant they've been. And this has just been an exclamation point. Holy smokes. Easy for me to say. And it's just been an exclamation point on his season and his career, really. And he's coming for that 7th world title this season. It's all but in his hands now, tying the all-time record. That would be with also Michael Schumacher. So Hamilton's coming for the records left, right, and center. And what more can you say about the British driver? Criminally underrated in the sports world as a figure for both equality and as an athlete himself. So, Kyle, this was just a great story. I'm so happy it happened in Germany, something that we really wanted to happen, whether he broke it in Germany or he tied it. It just seemed like the right place to do it. Was gifted a helmet by obviously Michael's son and Mick Schumacher. He was there to give him a really special helmet to win. I'm sure that was an emotional moment for both of them. I'm sure Mick was very happy to see that it's Lewis to break or tie the record, and hopefully he'll be on the grid battling Lewis someday as well. So what are your thoughts here, Kyle? I know we asked that a lot, but your thoughts are very, very important to this show. But this is a great moment for the sport, across motorsports, across sports in general, that it's Lewis Hamilton, someone that is iconic across sports in a sports figure, tying the all-time record set by Michael Schumacher.
It's fantastic to see, and it's something that recently has been an inevitability versus something that could happen, and it's great to see it happen at Germany as well, as you mentioned there, just given the history with Michael and everything there, obviously having Mick there as well to kind of have that moment afterwards was awesome to see as well. But Hamilton does it again, and obviously we didn't get necessarily the battle that we were expecting with Bottas there because of the battery issue, I believe it was, with the ERS that failed there, which was unfortunate to see because Bottas was having such a nice weekend as a whole. So that was unfortunate to see for both Bottas and just the quality of the race, but it's still a strong one. The mid-pack battle was awesome, but focusing here on Hamilton, what can you really say about him? We've talked about it a bit here these last few weeks, just in anticipation of this and him eventually breaking the record as well. And just a remarkable talent. And even though he's in the best car, he made the decision to go there, and he has to actually have the success there. It's very easy to step in the top car and crush under the pressure, and Hamilton hasn't faltered any step of the way. So it's been awesome to see him do this. And as much as maybe some people complain about the fact that Hamilton's always at the top and everything like that, you're witnessing true greatness. And even though it might not be the most entertaining thing to see him win every single week, it's a remarkable achievement nonetheless. And it's kind of similar to what we saw in Jimmy Johnson's prime in NASCAR, where people kind of got bored of him winning races and bored of him winning championships and maybe hurt fan interest in that regard. But I feel like at this point it's swinging back around, and the fact that he's tying the all-time wins record and he's shortly going to be winning his 7th world championship. I feel like it's swinging from oh, Hamilton won another race too. Let's appreciate this while we're still watching it. And I don't think he'll be retiring soon by any means, but there is an end date for this. Like, this isn't going to go on forever, just like it is for everybody. And we need to appreciate it while it's happening. And in these next couple of races, obviously this one included, when he's going to be setting these records, matching records, and eventually breaking it, we need to appreciate these moments and appreciate Hamilton for the athlete that he is, and also the advocate that he is, and everything that comes with him. So there's nobody else that I'd want to be setting these records. You can't pick a better person than Lewis Hamilton, given everything about him. And by the end of the season, we'll probably have a new all-time wins record.
Oh, it's very surely going to happen. Maybe even next weekend. For the next race there. But I'm just in awe of what he's able to do. It's
insane.
It's just so consistent, so incredibly awesome. Like, it's just like you don't appreciate it maybe as much in the moment for a lot of people. I've tried to do that recently over the past couple of seasons, where I appreciate these kind of things more, because when I look at Jimmy Johnson kind of thing, I was upset when he won so many things on such a consistent basis, and it seemed like it was never going to end. And it has ended for Jimmy Johnson in a very disappointing way. And the fact that I maybe didn't appreciate it as much as I probably should have in retrospect, just because of how incredible of an accomplishment it is. I regret doing that, but I'm trying to do that with Hamilton, in that, he wins a lot. It's an incredible number, 91 wins in a shorter schedule compared to something like NASCAR, where they race 36 times a season. They only race, this has been obviously an unforeseen season, but in previous seasons around 20, even sometimes less in a lot of years. To have 91 wins in your career is something that should be celebrated for sure. And I'm just going to try and soak this moment up for as long as I can, because who knows if we'll ever see someone even come close to what Hamilton's setting right now in terms of championships, wins, podiums, whatever you want to say. Hamilton is going to break basically all the records that have been set by Schumacher and anybody else in Formula One, all but certainly. So I am just in awe of what he's done, and I'm sure Schumacher, if he was there and he was able to celebrate that moment with him, he would be just elated for him as well, because what Schumacher did behind the wheel of a car is unbelievable as well. That can't be understated enough. Watching some of his old races sometimes, and growing up in a German family and stuff like that, he's always been something that we've always looked up to in some respect, and the fact that record's already tied and it's going to be broken in a mere moments is something that's really, really cool to witness. And who knows if we'll ever see it again, like I said. So I'm really, really happy for Hamilton. He's deserving of it for sure. It'll be interesting to see if anybody can ever come close to what he's doing. I feel like we're in the golden era of sports right now across the board, with who's winning championships and if dynasties will ever be such a thing. I don't know if anybody will ever have 7 Cup Series titles again, kind of thing. Like, that's going to be very, very difficult with this current playoff format. And with Formula One, who knows if anybody can ever get to this many wins. Championships may be attainable depending on your circumstances, but across the board, you need to be super consistent. So Lewis Hamilton, props to you, my man. I can't wait for that 92nd win, but 91st is a pretty special moment to have witnessed. So just kind of to wrap up here, Kyle, before we give our final thoughts of the race itself, Max Verstappen comes home second with the fastest lap on the last lap as well. So really cool to see for the Dutch driver, kind of maybe taking the moment away from Hamilton there at the end, but Verstappen gets second, and Daniel Ricciardo gets his first podium for Renault. Forgot to do a shoey on the podium. He realized it afterwards. Crazy. It was very funny to see. He did it on social media afterwards, after he realized he was so caught up in the moment that it ended for himself. Team, and obviously as a result for him getting a podium, the team principal, Cyril Abiteboul, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not going to try and butcher it or something. It's Cyril. I'll just call him that. He's going to have to get a tattoo. That has been widely talked about across the media in Formula One, that he's going to get a tattoo if Ricciardo gets a podium. And I'm sure it's going to be somehow German related to commemorate the occasion. So Ricciardo's definitely been on the verge of that P4 a lot of times this season, and he finally breaks through with that podium finish. Really, really cool to see for himself. And Perez finishing fourth, really, really solid showing for him for the Racing Point. Sainz coming from 10th to 5th is a really good result for himself. Gasly P6, really solid for him. Leclerc falls back from P4 to P7. The Ferrari just doesn't have the race pace it needs to be competitive compared to some of the other guys. Nico Hulkenberg, driver of the day, goes from last to 8th. Incredible stuff from Nico Hulkenberg.
Get that guy a full-time ride again.
Yeah, it's deservedly so. People underestimated him underappreciated his talent at Renault, even when he's getting solid finishes, but maybe not that breakthrough moment. I think these results this season have shown that he's capable of a really solid ride here in the future, and it may not come to fruition next season, but hopefully he keeps poking his head around, maybe not in replacement roles, but starts to gain some leverage in the garage area so that he can get a full-time ride. Grosjean P9 and then Giovinazzi P10. And as a result of these points finishes, 9 different teams scored a point on Sunday for only the second time since 2010, with Williams being the only team not to score a point on Sunday. AlphaTauri records their best scoring streak in their team's history with 8 consecutive points finishes. So just a couple of stats there to round out the German Grand Prix. But thoughts here, Kyle, overall, the entire race with Nürburgring coming back on the calendar for this kind of one-off race. Who knows if it'll be back in the future. But what were your thoughts as a whole from Hamilton winning, records being broken left, right, and center, and then just the race as a whole?
Yeah, I thought the race as a whole was actually pretty good. And obviously we didn't necessarily get the race for the win that we maybe anticipated, but I thought the mid-pack battle was very, very entertaining, watching some of the reliability issues, but more so watching the fight for that last podium spot. And that's always fun to watch with how close the mid-pack is. It looked like Perez might have it for a moment there, and then Ricciardo came back. So that was very, very fun to watch. And then obviously the late race safety car and then the restart there was entertaining as always. And hearing Hamilton and Verstappen complain about the cold tires, they're waiting too long, and then immediately going off to a blistering start. Though Verstappen did have some issues there on the start, so I'll hear him out a little bit more for the cold tires argument. But no, it was fantastic to see Hamilton do what he did. A pretty solid race as well, and just an overall pretty solid weekend.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more there. I'm happy that they had a German Grand Prix this season. I'm biased on that, but I think it's deservedly so with the history that Germans have had in this sport and what kind of the country has played in the growth of Formula One and what it's created. I think it should be a mainstay on the calendar no matter what across the board. So hopefully we'll be back either at Hockenheimring or at Nürburgring or whatever they want to, or wherever else they want to go in Germany. But I think it needs to be back on the calendar. I liked having it back at the Nürburgring, something that I've kind of grown up racing on and some different racing video games and stuff like that. It was cool to see it back on the surface. And they had overtaking. It wasn't really an issue on Sunday. And I think it provided some really solid racing. Obviously great to see some fans in the stands as well for a Formula One race as well. So that's all the news, notes, race recaps I've got here, Kyle, for myself. It's been a very long one, very entertaining race weekend. We expected that coming into this weekend. We set high expectations for the races, and with the weather for the NASCAR side of things, and then records being broken on the Formula One side of things, it was a great weekend overall.
Yeah, fantastic weekend. Obviously, the Charlotte Roval was always entertaining. Getting that wet weather race was awesome to see. No Truck Series, which was a little bit sad, but we'll be back with that this upcoming weekend with a very interesting twist there as well, with Haley Deedy making her Truck Series debut. And obviously, the Nürburgring was great to see it added back to the schedule as well. So very fun weekend of racing, as we've had quite a bit recently. We've had quite a few good ones recently. And just finally here on Lewis Hamilton, because I was interested to see it because I haven't seen it in a while. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton ties the career total wins. But the big thing is that it's not even like he's done this having raced a bunch more races than everybody else. You look at it in total races, Michael Schumacher up at 308 and 91 total wins, and Lewis Hamilton currently sits at 91 wins in 261 races. And that puts him third all time in win percentage, just behind obviously Juan Manuel Fangio, who will never be passed at 46%, winning 24-52. That'll never be touched. And then obviously Alberto Ascari, number 2 as well. Just a little bit ahead of Hamilton there at 39%, winning 13 of 33 back in the early days of Ferrari. So the fact that he's third all time as well in win percentage is remarkable, given he's been in 261 races versus everybody else around him who's been in 52, 33, 73, and much of the early days of Formula One guys around him. But there's a pretty big gap between him and kind of the newer era of Michael Schumacher down at 29%, Jackie Stewart, who is obviously early days Formula One, but a little bit later than your Fangios and Ascaris, 27%, Senna, 25%, Alan Prost, 25%. So he's just kind of in a league of his own right now in terms of the newer era of things, looking past those early days of the 50s and even 60s. So it'll be fun to see him eventually break that all-time wins record as well, and just kind of see how high he can get up. At this point, we kind of feel inevitable that he'll hit triple digits, but who knows? We need to appreciate it for what it is currently. And it's something that we didn't do with Jimmy Johnson. I don't feel specifically for myself. Didn't appreciate it enough when he was at the top of his game. And now looking at his retiring season and him going out without a win, most likely, feeling a little bit disappointed there. So just appreciating Hamilton for what he's doing right now before it's too late.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in awe. Like I said earlier, it's just a remarkable accomplishment. So I put a graphic up there as well on the green flag. Make sure to go follow us there.
Excellent one, yes.
I'm pretty happy with how that one turned out to commemorate the special occasion with Hamilton and Schumacher tying the all-time wins record. So make sure to go follow us at the green flag. We'll have our fantasy recap posted up there later this week. We'll be back here on Thursday to discuss the weekend ahead with Kansas, with all three series back on track with the Cup Series, the Truck Series, and the Xfinity Series. And no Xfinity Series next weekend or the Formula One as well. So just the Cup NASCAR weekend this upcoming weekend. But with that, I've been Lucas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you guys did have a happy Thanksgiving. And we'll talk to you later this week.